What would happen if the most visionary man alive disappeared on his first day on Mars? The broadcast began like every other milestone moment in human history, slow, overly rehearsed, and yet somehow, still electric with anticipation. Every major news outlet across the globe had their cameras trained on the same thing, a crimson sky, shimmering with the thin atmosphere of Mars. Billions were watching. Elon Musk, the man who had once said, "I'd like to die on Mars, just not on impact," had finally arrived. The red planet sprawled out behind him, raw and endless. The spacecraft door hissed open. For a moment, the world held its breath. He stepped down slowly, planting his boots into centuries of stardust. "This is for all of us," he said softly into the mic, though his voice barely made it through the thin static. The signal cut in and out, expected at such a distance. No one flinched. Not yet. But then, silence. Not the awe-inspiring kind. Not the type that comes when something sacred is happening. This was different. There were no follow-up words. No secondary camera angles. No celebratory voiceover. Just, nothing. On Earth, networks scrambled to re-establish connection. Tech teams at NASA and SpaceX assumed it was a temporary interference. Mars's dust storms often scrambled signals. Surely, this was routine. But 5 minutes passed. Then 20. Then an hour. Still nothing. The face of Mission Commander Elisa Grant at SpaceX HQ said it all. Pale. Confused. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the console edge. She leaned into her headset, speaking low, as if not to panic the thousands watching live. "Eagle 1, do you copy?" No response. "Elon, this is Earth. We're not receiving telemetry. Please respond." Still nothing. Was this part of some dramatic reveal? An experiment? A delayed stream? No. The signal wasn't just garbled, it was gone. And with it, so was the man. Newsrooms exploded. Elon Musk missing on Mars became the fastest trending phrase in the history of the internet. Stock markets trembled. People cried. Others doubted. Some even cheered. Publicity stunt, one headline read. Technical failure, another tried to justify. But deep down, something didn't feel right. There were no signs of distress before landing. No mechanical anomalies. No warnings. Everything had gone exactly according to plan, until it hadn't. Social media turned into a firestorm of wild theories. He made contact with aliens. He never actually went, it was all CGI. He triggered a hidden defense system left by another civilization. And perhaps the most popular one. He became one with Mars. 3 hours after the last transmission, SpaceX released a brief statement. "We have lost direct communication with Elon Musk after a successful landing on the Martian surface. Our teams are working around the clock to re-establish contact. We ask for privacy and patience during this time." The internet responded with exactly zero of both. Videos of Elon's final steps flooded every screen. People slowed the footage, zoomed in on shadows, analyzed every grain of Martian soil. Reddit threads turned into digital war rooms. And then, a voice. At hour 4, minute 12, a strange sound came through the audio logs, just one word, buried under layers of static. It didn't match any languages. It wasn't in any known dialect. But to some, it sounded unmistakably like "Welcome." That's when the theories stopped feeling like jokes. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Inside a darkened control room in Texas, Elon's teenage son, Xavier, sat in front of a glowing screen. He hadn't moved in hours. No one could reach him. Not his mom. Not his siblings. Not even Grimes. He stared at the frame frozen on screen, his father's silhouette against the red dust, right before everything cut to black. Xavier clenched his jaw. He'd always had a complicated relationship with his dad. Love mixed with resentment. Admiration twisted with distance. Elon had promised to take him one day. But instead, he'd left them behind. Now he was gone. Just like that. Meanwhile, in a clean lab buried beneath Hawthorne, California, a small group of SpaceX engineers huddled around a blinking screen. A single packet of data had arrived. Unscheduled. Unrecognized. Unexplained. Encrypted in a language they didn't know, but with unmistakable Earth-based coding in its structure. As if, something, or someone, wanted it to be deciphered. They opened it. Lines of gibberish at first. Then images began to flash. They weren't from the landing. They weren't even from Mars. The images were of Earth. But different. Cities with impossible architecture. Oceans glowing with what looked like biolight. Skies filled with silent black ships. And then a final frame. Elon's face. Eyes closed. Suspended in something like water. A single tear floating from his cheek. Back on Mars, inside the silent dust of a world billions of miles away, Elon Musk stood, staring into the horizon. His comms were off. Not because they failed. Because he turned them off. His helmet display flickered with a symbol that hadn't been there before, like an ancient rune, etched in light. He knelt and pressed his gloved hand to the red soil. "Are you here?" he whispered. The ground trembled. From beneath the surface, something shifted. And somewhere deep in the rock below, something ancient awakened. Elon Musk wasn't born to be a household name, but perhaps he was always destined to be one. He was born in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971, to a Canadian mother, May, and a South African father, Errol. From an early age, Elon exhibited a level of curiosity that seemed far beyond his years. It wasn't toys or games that caught his attention, it was the stars, the future, and the machines that powered human progress. But his childhood wasn't idyllic. Elon was often bullied. At just 10 years old, he was diagnosed with a severe stutter and a tendency to lose himself in books. His classmates didn't understand him, and he had trouble fitting in. The world outside his imagination was harsh, and those years left a scar on him. The other children would call him cruel names, mocking his stutter, his strange ideas, and his refusal to conform. His parents, although supportive, were emotionally distant. His father, Errol, was an engineer who ran a successful engineering business, but he was cold and occasionally cruel. Elon would later describe him as emotionally abusive, and their relationship would never recover. His mother, May, was a model and dietitian who tried to support him in her own way but had her hands full raising 3 children in a volatile environment. It wasn't just the bullying that left an impression on young Elon. It was also the growing sense that the world around him was holding him back, that there were greater things waiting beyond the confines of South Africa, beyond the ordinary. At 12, Elon had already written his first computer game, Blaster, a rudimentary space adventure game where players had to destroy an alien spacecraft. It was a simple program, but it sold for $500 to a local magazine. For Elon, this small victory marked the first of many moments when he would realize his potential, his ability to create something new, something that would push boundaries. But the real turning point came when Elon's parents separated. The breakup was messy, filled with bitterness and accusations, and it left Elon with a deep sense of abandonment. His mother moved to Canada with her children, while his father remained in South Africa. The separation forced Elon to confront the reality that the world he once thought he could control was unpredictable, cold, and full of pain. Still, Elon did what he always did, he channeled his pain into something greater. At 17, he left South Africa and moved to Canada to attend Queen's University. It was his escape. But more than that, it was his chance to build the life he'd always imagined for himself. After just 2 years at Queens, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. He was determined to make a mark on the world. The path from a young dreamer to one of the wealthiest and most influential men on the planet wasn't easy. In fact, it was downright painful. Elon's first real venture into the world of business came in 1995 when he dropped out of Stanford University after just 2 days to pursue Zip2, a software company he co-founded with his brother, Kimball. While Zip2 didn't immediately revolutionize the world, it was a start, one of those early steps that set the tone for everything that came next. The company's sale in 1999 for $307 million was a success, but it was also a moment that marked the beginning of something much bigger. PayPal, the payment platform that Musk helped to build, was born out of that sale. While Elon wasn't there for the company's final moments, he was ousted from PayPal after a management shakeup. The money he made from the sale gave him the means to pursue his real passion, space exploration. By the time Elon had launched SpaceX in 2002, he was already a millionaire several times over, but this was his obsession. This wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about a singular vision, Mars. For Elon, the dream of Mars wasn't just a lofty idea. It was personal. He wanted to make humanity multiplanetary. He wanted to create a backup for civilization, a chance to start over in case something went wrong on Earth. A dream born from the early memories of his life, from the days when he sat alone, gazing at the stars in South Africa. But it wasn't just about survival. It was about possibility, about what might be. And yet, despite all of his success, there was a dark side to Elon's ambition. His drive to push the boundaries of possibility came at a personal cost. His relationships were often strained. His marriages faltered, first with Justine Wilson, then with Tallulah Riley. His obsession with SpaceX and his work at Tesla left little time for the emotional intimacy that makes relationships work. Elon poured everything into his companies, often neglecting his emotional well-being. His children, particularly Xavier and Griffin, often bore the brunt of his absence, both physically and emotionally. They grew up with a father who was rarely around, not because he didn't love them, but because he was so focused on his larger-than-life mission to change the world. But despite the personal toll, Elon didn't stop. His ambition was relentless. He knew that to achieve his vision, he would have to sacrifice everything, even his own humanity. As the years went by, Elon's vision for Mars became increasingly focused. He poured his fortune into developing rockets that could reach the Red Planet, SpaceX's Falcon rockets, followed by the Starship program. Every failure was a lesson, and each lesson brought him closer to the impossible dream. When he finally set foot on Mars, it wasn't just a monumental achievement for mankind, it was Elon Musk's crowning moment, the realization of a dream that had lived within him since childhood. But it came with a price. Now, standing alone on the surface of Mars, Elon's mind raced. He had pushed his body to the limits, yes, but it was his soul that had truly been tested. As he gazed out over the Martian landscape, he realized something unsettling. Perhaps Mars wasn't just about reaching the stars. Perhaps it was about understanding what lay beneath the surface of himself. Elon Musk was no stranger to setbacks. In fact, if there was one thing that had defined his entire career, it was the ability to fail spectacularly and keep moving forward. He had never been content with mediocrity. Success was not an option for him, it was a requirement. At 24, Elon had already tasted his first victory in the world of tech. The sale of his first company, Zip2, a software company designed to help newspapers create online directories, had netted him $307 million. His brother, Kimball, had been his partner, and while the sale was a financial windfall, it didn't satisfy Elon. The goal had always been bigger than just money, it had always been about the future. And at the time, the future was space. In 2002, with most of his wealth now tied up in PayPal, the online payment giant that he helped create, which was later sold to eBay for $1.5 billion, Elon Musk turned his attention to something that seemed more than a little impossible: space exploration. Elon's vision was clear from the start. He wanted to colonize Mars. He wasn't interested in being just another figure in the aerospace industry. He wanted to revolutionize it, make space travel accessible to everyone, and most importantly, make humanity a multiplanetary species. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The odds were stacked against him. The aerospace industry was dominated by giants like NASA and Boeing, companies with decades of experience and massive resources. The price of sending something into space was astronomical, pun intended. SpaceX, his newly founded company, had nothing, no funding, no resources, and no track record. But Elon didn't mind. He was used to having nothing. The odds were always against him, and he liked it that way. If it's easy, it's not worth doing. Elon put everything on the line, his entire fortune, to fund the creation of SpaceX. The first few years were grueling. The company suffered failure after failure, with rockets exploding on the launch pad, millions of dollars wasted on prototypes that didn't work, and no one willing to take him seriously. It wasn't until the third rocket launch, the Falcon 1, that SpaceX had its first major breakthrough. After a string of failures, the small, underfunded company managed to get its rocket into orbit. It wasn't just a triumph for SpaceX, it was a statement that changed the course of the entire aerospace industry. That moment marked the turning point for SpaceX. But it also marked the beginning of something more personal for Elon. He wasn't just fighting to build a company, he was fighting against his own deepest fears. The idea of colonizing Mars wasn't just a business venture. For Elon, it was personal. There were moments when his obsession with Mars seemed to take over everything else in his life. Every conversation, every decision, every project was aligned with one simple question: how can I get to Mars? His relentless drive to create SpaceX and Tesla, the electric car company he also founded, was fueled by a singular purpose: to make sure that humanity had a future beyond Earth. As his empire grew, so did the risks. SpaceX became his baby, a reflection of all his hopes, dreams, and fears. Every failed launch, every setback, was a blow to his soul. But he always came back swinging. Every failure made him stronger, more determined. And yet, behind all of that success, there was a deeper fear, a fear of failure, of not being able to bring the dream to fruition. In fact, it wasn't until 2010, 8 years after SpaceX's founding, that Elon Musk really started to breathe easier. That's when the company secured its first NASA contract, an achievement that seemed impossible when he first started. With that contract came legitimacy, funding, and, most importantly, credibility. But for Elon, the goal remained the same: Mars. SpaceX's greatest triumphs came with the Falcon 9 rocket and its reusable technology, which dramatically lowered the cost of space travel. The Falcon 9's ability to land back on Earth, allowing it to be used over and over again, was revolutionary. And while Elon took great pride in these accomplishments, his mind was already fixed on the future. The Starship program would be the next step. A giant, fully reusable rocket designed to take people to Mars and beyond. This wasn't just a business venture, it was a legacy. It was the culmination of everything Elon had worked for. But as ambitious as it was, the Starship project wasn't without its challenges. The rocket's design was untested, its cost overwhelming, and its timelines consistently pushed back. Each new prototype test was met with huge expectations, and spectacular failures. But each failure brought SpaceX closer to the dream. For most of Elon's life, the idea of failure had always been at the back of his mind. Failure, he believed, was an inevitable part of the journey. But when it came to Mars, he realized something profound. It wasn't about not failing. It was about what you did after you failed. The day SpaceX successfully landed the Starship prototype on the launch pad was the day Elon Musk knew that Mars was no longer a distant dream, it was within reach. That landing wasn't just a triumph for SpaceX, it was a personal triumph for Elon. It was proof that the impossible could be made possible. It was proof that, with enough will, enough perseverance, and enough sacrifice, Mars was within humanity's grasp. It was a moment of sheer triumph for Musk, but it also marked the beginning of something much greater. As the starship roared into the Martian atmosphere, with its engines screaming against the vacuum of space, Elon knew that this mission wasn't just a triumph for SpaceX, it was a revolution. He stood at the controls of a spacecraft, one of only a few people on the planet with the knowledge, resources, and obsession to make it happen. And as the craft neared Mars's atmosphere, Elon took a deep breath, for he knew one thing for certain. The journey to Mars was only just beginning. The moment the starship touched down on the dusty Martian soil, there was an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. Elon Musk had made it. After years of dreaming, struggling, and sacrificing, the first human on Mars had finally set foot on the red planet. The spacecraft's massive engines powered down, leaving behind an eerie silence. The wind, if you could call it that, was barely perceptible, a faint breeze that stirred the dust on the ground. The sky, tinged with a faint orange hue, seemed almost surreal, as if it belonged to a distant dream. Mars, a planet long studied from afar, now felt like a strange, alien reality. Inside the starship, Elon remained seated for a moment, taking in the significance of the moment. He closed his eyes, allowing the silence of Mars to sink in. For so long, this moment had been a mere idea, a goal, a part of his grand vision. But now it was real. The first human on Mars. His name would be etched into the annals of history. Elon rose from his seat and approached the airlock, his mind racing with thoughts of the mission ahead. He had a plan, a well-rehearsed series of actions and tasks that needed to be carried out. First, he would set up communications with Earth. Then, he would deploy the initial habitat module, which had been carefully designed to sustain life on Mars. It was all very technical, very planned. But the magnitude of what was happening still felt almost impossible. Elon pressed the button to open the airlock and stepped onto the surface of Mars. The red soil crunched beneath his boots, and he marveled at the vast emptiness stretching before him. His shadow stretched long in the low gravity, and for a moment, it felt as though he was the only living thing in the universe. But Mars, as Elon would soon discover, was not empty. It was not the barren wasteland everyone had imagined. As he began to set up the equipment for the first phase of the mission, Elon's mind wandered. What if this was all wrong? What if Mars was not a lifeless planet but something far more mysterious? The initial tasks went smoothly. Cameras were set up, the solar panels were deployed, and the habitat modules were prepared for installation. But then, as he moved toward an area just outside the landing zone, something caught his eye. It was a faint glimmer, barely visible in the distance, just beyond the rocky terrain. At first, Elon thought it was a trick of the light, perhaps a reflection from one of the modules. But as he squinted, his pulse quickened. There was something there. Elon made his way over to the glimmering object, his boots kicking up the reddish dust as he moved. The closer he got, the more his heart raced. There, partially buried in the Martian soil, was an object, something unnatural, something not of this planet. It wasn't just a rock or a piece of space debris, it looked like an artifact. The shape was angular, almost geometric, unlike anything he'd seen before. It had sharp edges and seemed to reflect the dim light of the Martian sky. Elon's mind raced with possibilities. Could it be some sort of alien technology? Or was it something human-made, left behind by an ancient civilization? He kneeled down, carefully brushing away the Martian dust that had accumulated over the object. His gloves scraped against the surface, revealing a series of strange symbols, etched into the metal. The symbols were unlike any language Elon had ever seen. They didn't match any known Earth scripts, nor did they resemble any alien languages speculated in the scientific community. What the hell is this? Elon whispered to himself, a mix of awe and disbelief in his voice. His heart pounded in his chest. He knew that the discovery of this object would change everything. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was revolutionary. A piece of alien history, sitting quietly on the surface of Mars, had just been uncovered. But why? Why here? Why now? As Elon examined the artifact more closely, he began to notice something even more unsettling. There were subtle vibrations coming from the object, faint but unmistakable. At first, he thought it was just the Martian atmosphere, reacting to the spacecraft's landing. But no, this was different. The vibrations were patterned, rhythmic. He reached out tentatively, his gloved fingers hovering over the surface of the object. When they made contact, the vibrations increased, and the symbols on the surface seemed to glow. It was as if the object was alive, reacting to his presence. His mind raced as the implications of this discovery began to settle in. Could this artifact be a remnant of an ancient Martian civilization? Or was it something alien, something from beyond the stars? The thought of extraterrestrial life, something that had been discussed in scientific circles for decades, was suddenly no longer just a theory. It was real. And Mars, the red planet that had long been thought to be barren, lifeless, was now a gateway to something far greater. Elon took a deep breath and keyed in a command on his suit's communication system. His voice trembled as he spoke into the microphone, trying to steady his thoughts. "This is Elon Musk. I've made a discovery. Something, it's not from here. I need immediate support." For the first time since arriving on Mars, Elon felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. The future, which had once seemed so clear, was suddenly clouded with questions, doubts, and possibilities he had never imagined. The next steps were no longer about setting up a colony, they were about understanding this mystery. Understanding what had been left behind, and what it meant for the future of humanity. As Elon continued to study the artifact, a sudden thought gripped him: what if this was dangerous? What if this object had been buried for a reason? What if it wasn't meant to be found? But it was too late to turn back now. The discovery had been made, and the world would soon know. There was no turning back. Whatever it was, Mars had awakened. And its secrets, now unveiled, were far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The quiet hum of the starship's communication system was the only sound breaking the eerie stillness of Mars. Elon sat on a small, rocky outcrop, staring at the mysterious artifact that had changed everything. His mind raced, struggling to process the implications of his discovery. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a puzzle far more complex than anything he had ever encountered. As he stood there, the Martian wind barely stirring the dust, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something bigger than himself. The object before him wasn't just a relic from an ancient civilization, it was a message, a warning. But what kind of warning? And who had left it here, on Mars? He had already sent a distress signal to Earth, but the transmission had been spotty at best. The distance between Mars and Earth was vast, and communication was slow, every message took minutes to travel. Elon's breath fogged up inside his helmet as he wiped the visor, staring at the symbols on the artifact again. They were still glowing faintly. Back inside the starship, Elon hooked up his tablet to the artifact's data stream. The vibrations had grown stronger, almost as if the object was responding to the technology around it. The symbols on the surface shifted, rearranging themselves into new patterns, almost as if they were alive. It was unlike any technology he had ever seen. He paused. Alive? He had to admit, there was something about the object that felt sentient, something almost organic. The longer he studied it, the more it seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. This wasn't just a machine. It was something else entirely. It was as if the object had been waiting for him. "What are you?" Elon whispered, almost as if the artifact could hear him. And then, as if in response, the symbols flashed brighter for a brief moment, and the ground beneath him seemed to vibrate. The Martian surface trembled in a way that Elon had never felt before. A low hum filled the air, coming from deep beneath the soil. His heart skipped a beat. Elon quickly pulled up the data logs on his tablet, trying to make sense of the vibrations. His fingers flew across the screen as he accessed various sensors on the starship and the surrounding area. The readings were bizarre. There were fluctuations in the electromagnetic field, unusual gravitational distortions, and even minute seismic activity. But the most shocking discovery came when he checked the atmospheric sensors. The air pressure on Mars was, of course, too thin to sustain human life without the aid of a spacesuit. Yet, the sensors were picking up a distinct chemical presence, something that shouldn't have been there. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was definitely there. Oxygen, mixed with trace amounts of nitrogen and methane, gases that didn't naturally exist in Mars' atmosphere. Elon's breath caught in his throat. Something had changed. The atmosphere of Mars was subtly shifting. Could it be related to the artifact? Was it interacting with the planet itself? As Elon pored over the data, he made a chilling connection. The vibrations from the artifact were not random, they were following a pattern. A seismic signal had been sent from the location of the artifact, and if the signal was traced, it led deeper into Mars' crust, to a location that was buried under miles of rock. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Mars was not an inert, lifeless planet. For decades, scientists had believed that Mars had once supported life, but that it had long since died off, leaving behind only dust and ruins. But this artifact, this strange object buried in the soil, was evidence that Mars had a far more complicated history than anyone had imagined. The planet wasn't dead, it had just been waiting. Elon's eyes widened as the implications set in. If the artifact was part of a larger system, what was the purpose of the seismic signal it was transmitting? What was buried underneath the surface of Mars, and could this network extend across the planet? The low hum continued, louder now, vibrating through his boots. It was almost hypnotic, and yet, there was something disturbing about it. Elon knew what he had to do, but the weight of the decision was enormous. Should he continue exploring this unknown? Should he go deeper into the planet's crust, risking everything? The stakes were unlike anything he had ever faced before. This was no longer a simple mission to colonize Mars. This was a discovery that could change the fate of humanity. And yet, there was no telling what dangers lay beneath the surface. The vibrations, the signals, the strange chemical markers, everything suggested that Mars had been waiting for this moment. But what would happen if someone else found this? What if other organizations, or even nations, decided to take control of the discovery? Elon had always thought of himself as a pioneer, a man willing to push the limits. But this wasn't just about space exploration anymore. This was a matter of humanity's survival. The consequences of his next move could change everything. As Elon debated his next course of action, the starship's communication system suddenly crackled to life, breaking his thoughts. The transmission was faint, but he could hear a voice. "Elon, this is Houston. We've been monitoring your signals. We have a problem. Something's not right." Elon's pulse quickened. He took a deep breath. His decision would be more significant than he had ever imagined. There were no easy answers, no simple solutions. Mars had awakened, and its secrets were just beginning to unfold. Elon sat in the control room of the starship, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen in front of him. The hum of the spacecraft's life support systems was the only sound, yet the tension in the air was thick. Mars had awakened, and with it, the weight of its secrets was becoming a burden too heavy to carry alone. The message from Houston had rattled him. The voice, shaky but authoritative, had warned him of an impending crisis. "Something's not right," they had said. But what did that mean? What was going on back home, and why were they suddenly concerned? Until now, everything had gone according to plan, except for the artifact. Elon took a deep breath and began reviewing the data from the past few hours. The vibrations from the artifact were now unmistakable, they weren't just seismic waves anymore. They were a network, a pattern that extended far beneath the Martian surface. He had begun to suspect that the artifact was not a standalone object, but part of something much larger. But what? His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden chirping of the communication system. It was an incoming video call, directly from Earth. He knew who it was. Elon, we need to talk, the familiar voice of Gina, one of the lead engineers at SpaceX, crackled through the speaker. Her expression was grim. We've been monitoring the situation. This isn't just a discovery anymore. It's a global security issue. Elon rubbed his temples, trying to focus. His mind was racing, torn between the discovery he had made and the consequences of revealing it. Gina, you don't understand. This isn't just some artifact. There's something deeper going on here. Mars isn't dead, it's changing. The atmosphere, the vibrations, the symbols, this is all connected to something far bigger than we thought. His voice was steady, but underneath, a hint of panic was creeping in. Gina's face hardened. We've already seen the data, Elon. The artifact isn't the only problem. There are strange fluctuations in your communication signals, as if someone, or something, on Mars is interfering. The atmospheric shifts you're recording. We can't explain them. She paused, her gaze turning cold. There's a significant risk to your safety and the mission. The international community wants answers. The last thing we need is a panic, but that's exactly where this is heading. You need to pull back, Elon. Stop investigating. Come home. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't just about the artifact anymore, it was about the mysterious signals, the unknown presence on Mars that was now raising alarms on Earth. The words, pull back, echoed in his mind, but he couldn't bring himself to agree. He had come so far, humanity had come so far, he wasn't about to stop now. I'm not pulling back, Gina. I'm going deeper. There's something here, something that could change everything. Her eyes widened. Elon, you're not thinking straight. The world is on edge. There are governments scrambling to control this situation. The UN has already called an emergency meeting. If you don't cease exploration, the consequences could be catastrophic. Her voice grew urgent. The last thing we want is an international conflict over a Martian discovery. You need to put the brakes on this. Elon stared at the screen, fighting the urge to respond with anger. International conflict. What were they really afraid of? Was it the potential alien technology? Or was it the fear that the discovery might not be theirs to control? The question gnawed at him, but he knew one thing for sure, this discovery was not just for the elite. It belonged to everyone. But would everyone agree? The idea of sharing this monumental discovery with the world seemed like a pipe dream. Could humanity handle it? Could they trust each other? Gina's voice broke through his thoughts, a mixture of frustration and fear. Elon, if you don't stop this, we'll have no choice but to cut the connection. The mission will be deemed too dangerous. He stood up abruptly, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on his chest. Cut the connection. That was no longer a simple threat, it was a real possibility. If he continued, he risked not only his own life but the lives of those still on Earth. He couldn't stop now. Gina, I can't do that. The truth is out here. Mars is showing us something we've never seen before, and I have to be the one to figure it out. His voice was firm, the words slipping out almost instinctively. There was a long pause. Gina was silent on the other end of the line, processing his response. Then, in a low voice, she spoke. Then we're on opposite sides of this, Elon. The communication cut out with a final beep, leaving Elon alone in the quiet control room. The weight of the moment settled over him, and the reality of his decision hit him hard. This was no longer just about Mars. It was about humanity's future. The world was watching, and, at this very moment, the stakes were higher than ever. Minutes passed. Elon stood motionless, staring out the window at the dusty Martian horizon, where the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape. The mission had started with the dream of building a new future for humanity, a future on Mars. But now, it had become a global political struggle. Earth had its own agenda, and Mars was becoming more than just a stepping stone. It was a flashpoint. He couldn't afford to think about the pressures from back home anymore. There was too much at stake. But as he prepared for the next phase of exploration, the reality was starting to hit him. This discovery would change the course of history, but it could also tear humanity apart. The tensions between the nations of Earth were already building, and Elon knew the next steps would have to be carefully calculated. He couldn't afford a misstep. As he stepped out of the starship once again to investigate deeper into the Martian surface, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The vibrations from the artifact continued, growing stronger with each passing moment. The strange chemical markers in the atmosphere, was someone, or something, responding to his presence? It was as if Mars itself had become alive, waiting for the next move. Elon felt the pressure mounting as he made his way toward the deeper network of vibrations. Whatever was down there, he couldn't stop now. But as he approached the next site, a sudden flash of light illuminated the horizon. It wasn't the sun. It was something else. Something alien. His heart pounded in his chest. What had he just uncovered? Elon's heart raced as he stood on the barren surface of Mars, staring at the glowing flash on the horizon. It had come from the same location where the vibrations from the artifact were most concentrated. The light was unlike anything he had ever seen, bright, almost electric, flickering like a beacon in the dusty Martian landscape. For a moment, he thought it could be a malfunction in his equipment, but the readings didn't lie. The artifact's energy surged again, stronger than before, responding to something he could not yet understand. What the hell is that? Elon muttered to himself, stepping cautiously forward. His boots crunched softly against the dust, but his mind was far from the ground beneath his feet. The flash had been deliberate. It had felt intentional. He pulled up his tablet, scanning the surroundings with every sensor he had at his disposal. Nothing in the data made sense. There were no temperature changes, no magnetic anomalies, no sudden atmospheric shifts. Yet, the light persisted, pulsating from the distant hill. Something was there, something that Mars had been hiding for millennia. The air around Elon grew heavier, more oppressive, as he advanced. His breath was shallow, fogging up the visor of his helmet. The wind had died down completely, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. It was as though the planet itself had paused, holding its breath. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled. The vibrations were no longer just coming from the artifact, they were coming from deep within Mars itself, as though the entire planet was alive. The pulse was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Elon stumbled back, his pulse quickening. He glanced nervously at his equipment. The signal from the artifact was growing exponentially stronger, almost impossible to ignore now. His first instinct was to retreat to the starship, but something stopped him. He needed to understand what was happening, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. He took a deep breath and forced his feet to move forward. Whatever was out there, he needed to find it. This was a turning point. The discovery had already begun to spiral beyond his control, but he was still the only one on Mars who had the answers. Elon approached the source of the flash, feeling a strange pull drawing him closer. The air felt thicker, almost oppressive, as he neared the site. As he stepped over the rise of the hill, the flashing light grew more intense, now casting a strange, otherworldly glow over the Martian surface. And then he saw it. A massive structure rose from the ground, half buried under centuries of dust and soil. The walls were made of a material that seemed to shimmer, as if it were alive. The surface was covered in strange patterns, much like the symbols on the artifact he had found earlier, only these were more complex, more ancient. They glowed faintly, as though they were somehow responsive to his presence. As Elon stepped closer, the ground beneath him began to hum again, and the walls of the structure began to shift. He froze. Something was happening. It was as if the structure was reacting to him. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, and he instinctively reached out for his communicator. "Houston, do you read me?" he said, his voice shaking with tension. The radio crackled before the voice of Gina came through. still strained. Elon, what's going on? We're seeing massive energy spikes from your location. You need to fall back, this could be dangerous. Elon didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the structure in front of him. The symbols on the walls shifted again, but this time, they formed a new sequence, one that seemed to beckon him forward. I don't think I can leave yet. His voice was low, almost a whisper. He couldn't tear his gaze away from the glowing patterns. Something deep within him told him that this was the key to understanding everything that had been happening on Mars. Without thinking, Elon stepped closer to the structure. As he did, the symbols on the walls began to pulse, responding to his presence. The energy in the air seemed to thicken, swirling around him in a charged current. He reached out with one hand, almost instinctively, to touch the surface of the wall. As his fingers made contact, a shock wave of energy surged through his body. For a moment, everything around him went dark. There was a strange, muffled sound, like a voice, far away, calling out to him. It wasn't in any language he recognized, but it felt like a message, like a warning. And then, the ground beneath him cracked open, a deep, resonating sound that echoed through the air. The energy spike surged to its peak. Elon staggered backward, his heart pounding. The glowing symbols flared to life around him, a blinding light that surrounded the entire structure. For a second, he couldn't see anything, just pure white light. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the light vanished, leaving the Martian surface eerily still. The Martian silence seemed louder now. Elon stood there, shaken to his core. What had just happened? He wasn't sure, but he felt like something had shifted, something had awakened. He reached for his helmet's visor, wiping it clear as the shock began to wear off. The landscape before him looked the same, but everything had changed. The structure in front of him had shifted too. The once still surface now revealed a large opening, a doorway that had been hidden beneath the stone for eons. It was no longer dormant, it was waiting for him. A voice crackled in his ear, this time from mission control. Elon, we have lost your signal. The voice sounded strained, urgent. Where are you? What's happening down there? Elon couldn't speak for a moment. His mind was still reeling from what had just happened. He wasn't sure what he had uncovered, but he knew it was far beyond anything humanity had prepared for. Something is down here. Something alive. The voice from Houston came again, more frantic this time. Elon, you need to return to the starship now. We can't control the situation from here. But Elon knew, deep in his gut, that it was already too late. Whatever had been hidden beneath the Martian surface for millennia was now awake. And it was watching him. Elon stood frozen before the glowing entrance to the alien structure, his mind racing. The pulsating energy field surrounding the opening had now faded, but the tension in the air was palpable, as if something was holding its breath, waiting for him to make the next move. He could feel the temperature dropping. The Martian night was beginning to settle in, but there was something else, something unnatural about the cold. He had crossed a line. There was no going back now. Elon, come in. The voice of Gina crackled through his calm link. She sounded more urgent than ever. We're tracking you. Where are you? He swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. Gina, there's a structure. It's not just an artifact, it's an entire underground facility. It's active. And it's alive. His voice wavered as he tried to comprehend what he had just discovered. There was a long pause on the other end before Gina's voice returned, barely above a whisper. Elon, you need to stop. The international community is in a state of emergency. You're not alone out there. There's something on Mars. Something we don't understand. Elon's eyes darted to the opening before him. He could feel the force calling him, like a magnetic pull. He wasn't sure what it was, but his gut told him it was something far bigger than he could have imagined. I can't stop now, Gina. The truth is down there. He lowered the comm device, his resolve hardening. He was no longer just an explorer. He was on the brink of discovering something that could change everything. With a deep breath, Elon moved toward the opening. The structure wasn't just a door, it was a gateway. As he stepped inside, the air shifted again, heavier now, more oppressive. The walls were lined with alien symbols, their glow faint but persistent, casting long shadows as Elon descended into the heart of the structure. The deeper he went, the more the vibrations from the artifact intensified. They were no longer just reverberations in the ground, they were thoughts, feelings, emotions. A faint whisper lingered in the back of his mind, almost imperceptible but undeniable. Something was speaking to him. The tunnel opened up into a large, circular chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, with massive pillars that seemed to hum with energy. In the center of the room was a large pedestal, its surface covered in the same glowing symbols. Elon's eyes were drawn to it, and as he approached, he felt the unmistakable pull of the artifact. He placed his hand on the pedestal, and a flash of light erupted, filling the room with an eerie glow. Then, a voice, not from his calm link, echoed in his mind. "You are not alone." Elon stumbled back, his heart racing. He could hear his breath echoing in the chamber, but the voice, the presence, it was real. Something was awakening. The walls trembled, and the pedestal began to shift. "This is where it began. This is where it ends." The words were cryptic, but they carried a weight that Elon couldn't ignore. A sudden loud crash reverberated through the chamber, followed by a sound like a low growl. Elon spun around, his heart hammering in his chest. The floor beneath him cracked open, and from the depths, strange mechanical beings began to rise, their bodies covered in ancient armor, their movements stiff and robotic. The creatures were humanoid, but with something deeply unnatural about them. They were tall, their faces obscured by dark, reflective helmets. They moved with precision, almost as if they had been waiting for this moment for thousands of years. Their armor shimmered with a faint blue light, matching the patterns on the walls. Elon backed away, instinctively reaching for his blaster. He hadn't come this far to be taken down by alien warriors. But as he aimed the weapon, a sudden realization hit him: these were not aliens. These were the remnants of the ancient Martians. Soldiers who had fought in an intergalactic war, and had been buried beneath the planet's surface for eons. But why? Why had they been buried? And what had they been fighting? The sound of a mechanical whirring cut through the tension. The soldiers had started to move toward him. Elon's mind raced. He couldn't fight them. The technology they had was beyond anything he had ever seen. These soldiers weren't just remnants, they were part of something bigger, something far more dangerous than he had imagined. "Elon, listen to me." Gina's voice pierced through the static, her panic unmistakable. "You're not alone down there. You have to get out, now. The whole planet is reacting. We can't control the situation. The signals you've sent out, they're waking something up, something that's been dormant for millennia." But Elon didn't have time to respond. The soldiers were closing in. A loud bang sounded from behind him. The walls of the chamber shuddered as something massive stirred in the depths of the structure. Whatever had been buried here was awakening, and it wasn't just the soldiers. It was something far more terrifying. The ground shook as a massive armored figure began to rise from the floor, its size dwarfing everything around it. The creature, or whatever it was unlike anything Elon had ever seen. It was alive, yet it was made of a strange, metallic material. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, unearthly light. And as it opened its mouth, a deep, guttural growl filled the chamber. Elon's breath caught in his throat. The giant figure before him was clearly the leader, the general of the ancient Martian forces. Its armor was adorned with strange symbols, ones that matched the ones on the artifact, the walls, and the soldiers. The Martian war machine had been hidden for a reason. It wasn't just a relic, it was a weapon, and it had been dormant for centuries. The voice in Elon's mind returned, clearer this time. This war is not over. His pulse quickened as the reality of the situation sank in. The ancient war between the Martians and an extraterrestrial invader had never truly ended. It had just been hidden beneath the surface. And now, Mars was awakening. As the general's eyes fixed on Elon, he knew what was coming. This wasn't just a discovery, it was the beginning of a new conflict. A war that had been fought on Mars long before humanity even knew the planet existed. And now, humanity was in its path. The massive figure before Elon towered over him, its glowing eyes locked on his, radiating an eerie, almost sentient intelligence. For a brief moment, the air in the chamber felt thick, as if every particle was charged with the weight of history itself. The Martian general, the warrior of an ancient civilization, was alive, and it had just awoken from a long, dormant sleep. Elon's heart pounded in his chest, every instinct screaming for him to retreat, but his feet felt like they were glued to the ground. This was more than a discovery. This was a revelation, a realization that Mars was not just a barren, lifeless planet. It had been the stage for a war between two civilizations, one of them long forgotten, the other now returning to finish what had been started millennia ago. The Martian general moved, its massive armored body creaking as it stepped forward, the ground beneath it shaking with each step. Elon instinctively raised his weapon, but his hands trembled. He knew it was useless. Whatever this behemoth was, it was far beyond any technology humanity had developed. The general's mouth opened, and for the first time, Elon heard it speak, not through a calm link, but in his mind. "You are the one who disturbed us. You are the one who awoke the war." Elon's pulse quickened. He could barely comprehend the words, but he understood the gravity of the message. The general's presence was not a coincidence, it had been waiting for someone like Elon, to come and uncover its secrets. The soldiers surrounding him, still as silent as ever, were the remnants of a forgotten army, and now they had been awakened for one purpose, to continue the war. "What do you want?" Elon managed to whisper, his voice barely audible. The general's glowing eyes fixed on him. The war never ended. It was buried beneath the surface of this planet. We were sent to protect it from those who would seek to invade. And now, you have unlocked the door. You have given them the key. The words hit Elon like a punch to the gut. He had always suspected that something deeper lay beneath the Martian surface, but this was far beyond his wildest imaginings. There was an invader, and it wasn't from Earth. As the general's words sank in, Elon's mind raced. An invader? Who? What did it mean for Earth? For humanity? Who is the enemy? What have we awakened? Elon demanded, trying to steady his breathing. The general's voice was colder now, more urgent. They are not of this world. We were here long before your kind arrived. We were sent to protect this planet from a force far more powerful than any human civilization can imagine. You have unlocked the door to that force, and now it will come for you. For us all. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath him, far more violently than before. The chamber's walls began to tremble, the pulsating lights flickering wildly. A low, rumbling sound reverberated through the hall, as if the very core of the planet was reacting to something. Elon's heart raced as he realized, something was coming. The general raised its massive arm, pointing towards the far wall of the chamber. At first, Elon couldn't make out what it was, just an outline, a shape hidden in the darkness. But as the lights flickered again, the shape became clear. A massive spacecraft, buried deep within the Martian rock. The size of a city, its sleek, dark surface was covered in the same symbols as the soldier's armor. It was ancient, but its technology was anything but primitive. This ship was a weapon, and it had been buried for a reason. We were sent here to stop them. The general's voice came again, more insistent. But now, the war has begun anew. You cannot stop what has already been set in motion. Elon stood there, his mind racing as the magnitude of the situation hit him. The discovery of the artifact, the alien presence, the soldiers, it had all led to this moment. The ancient war had never ended. It had simply been paused, buried beneath layers of rock and time. But now, the enemy was coming. He could feel it. There was no more time for questions. Elon, you need to get out of there, now. Gina's voice was frantic, the panic in her tone rising with each passing second. The whole planet is reacting. We can't control the situation from here. The energy spikes are increasing exponentially. Elon's mind spun, but he knew she was right. The Martian general had revealed enough, the enemy was real, and it was on its way. It was a race against time. He couldn't just stand there and wait for the inevitable. But what could he do? He was alone on Mars, facing alien soldiers, a resurrected war machine, and an unknown extraterrestrial threat. His comm link was now picking up disturbances from the Earth side, satellite images showing strange anomalies in the Martian atmosphere. The storm he had feared had already begun to brew. Get back to the starship, Elon. Gina's voice broke through the static, a lifeline in the chaos. Now. Before it's too late. He didn't need to hear it again. Without thinking, he turned and began to run, his boots pounding against the Martian floor. The chamber's walls were closing in, and the sound of the mechanical soldiers rising from their dormant state was growing louder. But as he ran, the ground shuddered once more. The alien ship began to hum, its energy systems slowly coming back to life. Elon could feel the ground beneath him vibrating with every passing second, as if Mars itself was waking from a long slumber. And with that awakening, the threat was becoming real. It was no longer just about exploration. It was a fight for survival. As he reached the entrance to the tunnel, he glanced back one last time. The general was standing still, but its eyes, its glowing, haunting eyes, followed his every move. The war was just beginning. Elon ran with everything he had, his boots kicking up clouds of red dust as he sprinted through the Martian tunnels. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. The metallic clank of his boots echoed in the otherwise silent corridors, a stark contrast to the chaos now unfolding beneath the surface. Every second counted. He could feel the energy fluctuations growing stronger, the ground trembling with the awakening of the ancient war machines. His comm link crackled in his ear, Gina's voice urgent and cutting through the static. Elon, listen to me. The satellites have confirmed a major energy spike. It's coming from your location. He didn't need the warning. He had felt the vibrations, heard the hum of the alien technology coming to life, and knew the worst was far from over. The ancient Martian weapons weren't just stirring, they were readying for battle. A full-scale invasion was underway. Ahead of him, the entrance to the surface loomed. The door to the hidden structure began to close behind him, its massive steel panels sliding shut with the kind of deliberate slowness that made it seem like time itself was slowing down. Elon didn't wait to see if it would seal completely. He pushed forward, his pace quickening. As he emerged into the open Martian landscape, the red dust whipped around him, and the towering starship, his only means of escape, was still parked on the far side of the landing zone. The spacecraft stood in stark contrast to the barren, desolate landscape. The starship's sleek frame was the only sign of human life on this cold, alien world. But now, it wasn't just a spacecraft. It was his last hope. But as Elon ran toward the ship, he realized he wasn't alone. From the horizon, a cloud of dust and smoke began to form, shaped like a massive storm, but moving with a deliberate purpose. The Martian soldiers were emerging from the ground, their metallic feet pounding the surface, their glowing eyes locked on him. They had been activated, and they weren't going to stop until they fulfilled their mission. The war was no longer confined to the underground, it had come to the surface. Elon. Get to the ship now. Gina's voice was more frantic than ever, but Elon could barely hear her over the roar of the oncoming Martian assault. The soldiers were drawing nearer, their mechanical movements synchronized, their energy weapons humming with ominous power. A quick glance at the starship showed that the ship's engines were already firing up, but it would take time for the spacecraft to fully power up. Time that Elon didn't have. He reached the starship's landing gear, pulling himself up and onto the surface. The distant rumble of the Martian warriors was growing louder. He had to make it inside, fast. But as he climbed aboard the ship, his eyes fell on something that made his stomach drop, an explosion of dust and debris on the far horizon. The Martian warships had launched. In the distance, he saw them, the alien ships. They were massive, sleek, and unnervingly silent as they pierced the Martian atmosphere, heading straight toward the landing zone. They were here, and they weren't alone. They were bringing an army with them. "Gina. I need you to get me a full communication link to Earth, now." Elon shouted into his comm link, fear creeping into his voice. "Elon, there's no time. We're already seeing planetary interference, communications are being blocked." Gina responded, her voice strained. "You need to get off Mars before they get to you. You need to leave now." Elon's hands tightened around the control panel of the starship, his fingers flying over the controls in an attempt to accelerate the ship's systems. He glanced at the viewport, the Martian warships closing in. The ship's engines were roaring, but they weren't at full power yet. The tension in Elon's chest was unbearable. Every moment felt like a countdown to destruction, but still, he couldn't let the fear take over. He had to be strategic, he had to outmaneuver them. If he couldn't get the starship in the air fast enough, they would be sitting ducks on Mars. The alien ships were closing in, the silhouettes now clearly visible against the Martian sky. Then it happened, the first shot. A bright flash of light erupted from one of the warships, striking the surface of Mars just outside the landing zone. A shockwave of energy rippled outward, shaking the ground and sending a cloud of dust into the sky. Elon felt the force from the blast rattle the starship beneath him. "Elon, they're firing. They're firing on the surface. Get moving now." Gina's voice was louder now, desperation lacing her words. Elon's hands trembled as he flipped the switches on the dashboard. The starship's engines roared to life, and with a gut-wrenching lurch, the spacecraft lifted off the Martian surface. But the Martian ships weren't backing down. They were following him. The chase had begun. As the starship soared higher into the sky, Elon's heart raced. Mars, once an isolated, lifeless world, was now an active battlefield. The Martian warships were closing in fast, their energy weapons locking onto the ship's signature. Elon pushed the engines to their limits, but it wasn't enough. The Martian warships were too advanced, and they weren't going to let him escape. "Elon, you need to initiate the emergency maneuvers. They're locking on to you." Gina's voice rang out through his comm, and he knew she was right. He had only one chance. With a swift motion, he flipped the switches to engage the starship's emergency thrusters, a series of powerful jets designed for rapid evasive maneuvers. The ship lurched violently as it banked sharply, diving toward Mars's surface and then swerving back up toward the atmosphere. For a moment, he lost sight of the enemy ships, but just as quickly, a massive explosion erupted in the distance. One of the warships had fired, and the shockwave ripped through the air, almost catching him. He could feel the heat from the blast on his face, but he didn't look back. His focus was on the horizon, the distant Earth. The starship's trajectory was set. Elon's heart pounded in his chest. The battle for Mars had begun. But it wasn't just a battle for the planet, it was a battle for humanity's survival. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The starship tore through the Martian sky, the thrusters at full power as Elon maneuvered with every ounce of skill he had. His hands gripped the controls with unshakable determination, every second pushing the spacecraft to its limits. Mars loomed beneath him, its red surface scarred by the ongoing chaos, its skies filled with the dark silhouettes of the Martian warships. As the ship rocketed toward the atmosphere, Elon took a glance at the external cameras. The alien ships had closed the distance, their energy weapons charging, and in their wake, the Martian soldiers, clad in their massive, ancient armor, were crawling from the surface, preparing for an invasion. His mind raced, calculating his next move. If he could get out of Mars's atmosphere, he could leave the Martian conflict behind, but would the alien ships let him go that easily? A sudden jolt sent a tremor through the starship. Elon's grip tightened as a beam of plasma fire slammed into the tail of the craft. A warning light flashed on the control panel, shields were down by 40%, and the impact had thrown the spacecraft off course. Elon, they're tracking you. You won't make it to Earth unless you act fast. Gina's voice crackled through the comm link, but it was drowned out by the deafening sound of the engines whirling and the ship's alarm system blaring. I know, Gina. I'm trying to get us to safety. Elon responded, his mind racing. He couldn't afford to panic, not now. He had to think clearly. The Martian warships were relentless, and he was running out of time. Suddenly, his comm system flickered, and the holographic map of Mars blinked to life on the dashboard. A new signal appeared, one that wasn't from any of the Martian ships, but one that made Elon's stomach churn. It was a transmission. Elon Musk. The voice echoed through the ship's speakers, low and guttural, but unmistakably familiar. It was the Martian general, the very one he had encountered underground. We have no intention of allowing you to leave this planet. The war is not over. Elon's hands shook slightly as he gripped the controls harder. This wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. The general was communicating directly with him, and the message was clear: Elon wasn't leaving Mars without facing the consequences. What do you want from me? Elon demanded, his eyes darting between the comm system and the radar screen. The alien ships were only minutes away from intercepting him. If he didn't act fast, this could be the end of everything. You opened the door. Now you will help us close it. The voice grew colder, more insistent. You cannot outrun the ancient pact. This world was meant to remain undisturbed. You cannot escape your fate. The transmission ended abruptly, and the Martian general's voice vanished into the static. But the weight of its words hung heavily in the air. Elon's eyes narrowed as he processed what had just been said. The ancient pact. Was this a reference to the same war that the general had mentioned earlier? The same war that had been fought long before humanity set foot on Mars. He had uncovered remnants of an ancient civilization beneath the surface of Mars, but he hadn't understood the full scope of what it meant until now. The war machines, the general, the alien ships, they were all tied to an event far more significant than he had realized. A war that had been paused for centuries, only to be reignited by his presence. Elon, you need to get out of there now. Gina's voice broke through his thoughts, but her words were too late. The Martian warships had entered firing range. Another blast struck the starship, sending the ship veering to the left. The shields were flickering dangerously, and the ship's systems began to malfunction. The once sleek spacecraft was now more of a vulnerable target in the vast Martian sky. The enemy was closing in, and Elon had no choice but to make a dangerous decision. He had to find a way to negotiate, or prepare for the fight of his life. Gina, are there any hidden Martian structures? Something we might have missed? Anything that could help us stop this? Elon's voice was calm now, though his pulse raced in his veins. He had to think strategically. The starship couldn't handle much more of this, he needed an edge. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Gina spoke, her voice trembling with urgency. There's a research station near the polar cap. It's old, not part of any official records. It could be connected to something the Martians left behind, a weapon, maybe, something that can disrupt their systems. But I don't know if it's still intact. Elon didn't hesitate. I'm going there. He turned the starship sharply, heading toward the polar cap, praying that Gina's lead would be enough. As the ship hurtled across the Martian landscape, the warships followed, their weapons charging again. It was now or never. But as the polar ice caps came into view, a sudden signal blip appeared on his radar. "What the hell is that?" Elon muttered, his eyes widening. It wasn't one of the warships. It wasn't a human signal. It was something completely unfamiliar. The transmission was faint, but its origin was unmistakable. It was coming from the research station. Elon's pulse quickened as he realized something. There was more to Mars than he had been led to believe. The Martians hadn't just built weapons, they had hidden secrets, and if he could uncover them, it might be the key to ending the conflict. As the starship descended toward the polar research station, Elon braced himself for the worst. The Martian warships were closing in fast, and he knew that once he landed, he would have little time to find the answers he so desperately needed. He had unlocked the door, and now he had to face the consequences. Would he find an ally in the remnants of the Martian civilization, or would he become another casualty in their ancient war? The starship shuddered violently as it broke through the Martian atmosphere, streaking toward the polar research station. Elon's eyes were locked on the descending landscape as the ship's hull groaned under the strain of the atmosphere. His heart raced, each beat thudding like a countdown to a future he wasn't sure he was ready to face. "Elon, you're getting close." Gina's voice crackled through his comm system. "The station is just ahead. You'll need to navigate carefully, the terrain is unstable. We don't know what condition it's in." Elon barely registered the warning. His focus was on the station that lay ahead, a seemingly abandoned outpost, its structure barely visible through the swirling Martian dust. It was eerily quiet. No lights. No signs of activity. Just the stillness of the desolate polar landscape. The starship touched down gently on the cracked ice surface, the ground beneath him groaning in protest as the engines powered down. Elon took a deep breath, the coldness of the Martian air seeping into the cockpit. For a moment, he just sat there, staring at the research station. The enormity of the situation crashed down on him. This was it. Whatever lay within the walls of this abandoned outpost could either give him the power to end the war or plunge Mars, and Earth, into further chaos. With his hands trembling slightly, Elon stepped out of the starship and onto the cold surface of Mars. The crunch of his boots in the frozen landscape echoed around him, the silence thick enough to suffocate. He made his way toward the entrance of the research station, his breath coming out in heavy clouds. The entrance doors were sealed, covered with a thick layer of Martian frost. Elon quickly activated his tools, using the starship's power reserves to break the seal. With a hiss and a groan, the door opened, revealing a darkened hallway beyond. Inside, the air was thick and musty, as if the station had been abandoned for centuries. Dust particles floated in the air, illuminated by the dim light from his helmet. The walls were lined with strange symbols, none of which Elon recognized. But they weren't just marks, they were warnings. He could feel it in his gut. Something about this place was dangerous. "Elon, be careful. If what we're seeing in the satellite scans is correct, there's a large power source somewhere inside." Gina's voice was laced with concern, but there was something else there too, something that felt like a warning. "I know, Gina. I can feel it," Elon muttered, his eyes scanning the darkened hull. He wasn't sure whether it was the tension or the cold that made him shiver, but he pressed forward, each step echoing in the silence. The deeper he went into the station, the more the feeling of unease grew. The station was ancient, its architecture unlike anything he had seen before. The walls were curved, not angular, as if they had been built by an intelligence that wasn't just advanced, it was alien in its design. At the heart of the station, Elon found what he was looking for, an enormous chamber, its entrance sealed by what appeared to be a series of mechanical locks. He approached cautiously, fingers brushing the surface of the door. "Elon, hold on." Gina's voice was urgent. "We've detected something. It's not just the weapon, it's a reactor, some kind of power core that seems to be tied to the Martian military network. You might be triggering something you're not prepared for, ***. But it was too late. Elon had already inputted the activation code, a series of symbols that seemed to appear from nowhere on his console. With a grating hiss, the door slid open. Inside the chamber was a sight that made Elon's blood run cold, a massive orb suspended in the center of the room by a network of alien technology. It glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, its surface constantly shifting and warping as if it were alive. The walls of the chamber were lined with arcane symbols that Elon couldn't comprehend, and a strange hum filled the air, vibrating through his bones. The object before him was no ordinary weapon. It was a Martian superweapon, one that seemed to harness unknown energy, and it was tied to the core of Mars itself. But it wasn't just a weapon. It was alive. A voice, deep and resonant, boomed inside his mind, the words unintelligible but full of intent. Elon froze, his heart pounding. He wasn't just seeing this weapon, he was feeling it, too. The power emanating from it was overwhelming, and yet, it wasn't malevolent. It was a warning, a plea, perhaps, to stop the war before it escalated further. "Gina, I found it. I found the weapon. But it's not like anything we expected. It's connected to Mars itself." Elon whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the energy core. "What do you mean? What is it?" Gina's voice was strained. "It's a living weapon. It's siphoning energy directly from Mars's core, and it's connected to the war machines that are now active. It's not something we can control easily." Elon's mind raced as he realized the full magnitude of the discovery. This weapon wasn't just a tool of destruction, it was the lifeblood of the ancient Martian civilization, and it was far more powerful than anything humanity could comprehend. As Elon analyzed the weapon, a tremor shook the station. The entire structure groaned, as if reacting to the activation of the weapon. Elon's heart raced. Something was wrong. He turned just in time to see the entrance to the chamber slam shut, sealing him inside with the weapon. The hum grew louder, and the walls of the room began to pulse with light, as if they were alive. Then, a chilling realization struck him. "Gina, I think I've just triggered something. Something that's going to change everything." Elon's voice was filled with panic. The weapon was awakening, and the power from Mars's core was being siphoned faster than he could imagine. It was going to destroy the station, and possibly the whole planet. Before he could react, the ground beneath him trembled violently. The power core was activating, and there was no turning back now. The research station was shaking violently as the power core hummed louder, its pulsing energy filling the chamber with a terrifying light. Elon's heart raced as he frantically scanned the walls, trying to find any kind of manual override or emergency shutoff. The Martian superweapon was coming online faster than he could keep up with, and the entire structure was starting to collapse around him. "Elon. What's happening?" Gina's voice crackled through his earpiece, but the static made it hard to hear her clearly. I don't know. The weapon is coming online. It's siphoning energy directly from Mars's core, and I don't think it's going to stop." Elon's voice was strained as he moved toward the control panels. His mind raced. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a reaction to the conflict, something built to respond to the war. If he couldn't shut it down in time, Mars itself could be torn apart. The walls of the chamber began to pulse with an eerie rhythm, like the heartbeat of an ancient civilization. The strange symbols on the walls flickered, lighting up as the weapon drew more energy. The more Elon tried to intervene, the more it seemed as if the station itself was fighting back, rejecting his presence, as though it were a living, breathing entity. "Elon, we're seeing some massive energy spikes from the station. If you can't stop it, the entire core could go critical. Mars could implode." Gina's voice was growing more desperate. Elon's pulse quickened. He had only moments. The room was getting colder as the energy core drained everything from the environment. His fingers flew across the console, trying to decipher the alien technology, but nothing seemed to make sense. The language on the screen was not one of numbers or symbols, it was a pattern, an algorithm of some kind, but the code was alive, morphing in ways that even Elon's mind could barely comprehend. As the tension grew, the pulsing energy reached its peak. Elon knew he didn't have much time. His head buzzed with thoughts, but nothing felt like a solution. Just as he was about to lose hope, a soft, unexpected hum filled the chamber, a voice. Elon Musk, the voice came, deep and resonant, but not from any speakers. It felt as if it were coming from the core itself. It was a voice he had heard once before, the Martian general. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a plea. You must stop it. The weapon, it was not meant for you. You cannot control it. Elon's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean? It was a fail-safe, a means to protect Mars from invaders, but it is not supposed to be triggered. You have disturbed the balance. Only the Martian descendants can control it. A strange realization hit Elon. This wasn't just a weapon of destruction. It was a guardian, a final line of defense for the planet itself. And he had inadvertently triggered it. The Martian civilization had left behind not just tools of war, but also a method of self-preservation. But that preservation came at a cost, a catastrophic one. How do I stop it? Elon demanded, his voice now urgent. Find the central node. It is hidden within the heart of the station. The energy flow must be rerouted, but it can only be done by a Martian. Elon's hands shook as he processed the words. He couldn't do it alone, not with his human technology. But there was one option left, one that he had hoped he wouldn't have to consider. Gina, get ready. I think we need to go deeper. Elon took a deep breath and forced himself to move. The control panel continued to flash warnings as the weapon powered up, its energy radiating outward, threatening to tear apart the very structure that held it. He knew what he had to do. The central node the Martian general had mentioned had to be in the heart of the station, a place that Elon had yet to explore. The walls were closing in, the temperature dropping, and with every passing second, the weapon was becoming more unstable. As he sprinted through the narrow corridors, the walls began to close in on him. The ceiling cracked, and the structure itself seemed to be reacting to his every movement. He had to find the node, or Mars would be lost. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared before him, the Martian general, or rather, his image, projected from an ancient holographic system embedded in the walls. Elon Musk, the voice was familiar but distant, like a ghost from another time. You have triggered the ancient defense, but it is not meant for your kind. You must stop it now. Only the true inheritors of Mars can do what is needed. Elon's chest tightened. Tell me what to do. I'm running out of time. The holographic figure flickered, and the voice softened. The only way to deactivate the core is to absorb its energy. You must become the vessel to carry the burden. Elon paused, his mind reeling. Absorb its energy? How? Place your hand upon the core. You will bond with the weapon, controlling it long enough to reroute the energy. But it will change you, Elon Musk. You will not be the same. The weight of the decision hit him like a ton of bricks. If he did this, he might save Mars, but he might also lose himself in the process. The chamber was now caving in, the air thick with dust and the sound of shifting metal. The core at the center pulsed brighter, and Elon knew that if he didn't act now, the whole station, and possibly the entire planet, would be destroyed. With no other choice, he rushed toward the energy core, his mind focused on one thing, saving Mars. The moment his hand made contact with the surface of the glowing orb, a shockwave of energy surged through his body. It was as though he had become one with the core, his mind, his body, and the Martian superweapon were linked in an instant. The pain was unimaginable, but in the depths of his consciousness, a strange calmness emerged. He could feel the energy, the sheer force of it, coursing through him. Now, Elon. You must reroute the flow. The voice of the Martian general echoed in his mind. With all his strength, Elon reached deep within the core's intricate network, twisting the flows of energy. The room around him cracked, the holograms flickering with intensity, but Elon didn't stop. He had to do this, Mars depended on it. And then, just as the core seemed ready to explode, the energy flow shifted, the pulsing light began to calm, and the weapon powered down. Elon staggered backward, his head spinning. The energy in the chamber faded, leaving behind a hushed silence. The Martian general's voice was gone, replaced by a feeling of deep peace. He had done it. But at what cost? As the dust settled, Elon looked down at his hands, no longer his own. The energy core had altered him. He could feel the connection to Mars, an ancient bond that was now a part of him. But the mission wasn't over yet. The war between Mars and Earth was far from finished, and Elon's discovery had only made the stakes higher. The silence was deafening. Elon stood alone in the heart of the abandoned Martian research station, the power core now dormant, its light flickering out like the final heartbeat of a dying star. The tremors had stopped. The walls that had once seemed alive with energy were now still. But inside him, a new energy surged, something far more profound than anything he had ever experienced before. He looked at his hands again. They were still his, but they felt different, charged, as though the Martian power that had once been contained within the core was now embedded in his very being. He felt the pull, the connection to the ancient Martian civilization, a force older than humanity itself. Elon, are you okay? Gina's voice broke through the silence, her voice distant but filled with concern. Elon took a slow breath. His voice came out steady, but there was an undercurrent of something else, uncertainty. I stopped it. I deactivated the core. But it's more than just that. Gina's voice tightened. What do you mean? What's going on? Elon glanced at the pulsing walls, still covered with strange Martian symbols. The knowledge he had unlocked was overwhelming. He wasn't just a visitor to Mars anymore. He had become something more, a part of it. Gina, I don't think we fully understand what we've unleashed here. Elon said, his voice distant as he stared at the now quiet core. The core, the weapon, it wasn't just a failsafe. It was the lifeblood of Mars itself. And now, I've bonded with it. I can feel it, Mars is, alive in a way I never thought possible. There was a long pause on the other end of the comm system. Gina's voice, when it came, was hesitant. Are you saying the Martian superweapon is connected to you now? Elon exhaled sharply. Yes. But it's more than that. The weapon is a part of me now. I can hear the Martian general's voice in my head, guiding me. But it's not just him. It's Mars itself, it's like the planet is speaking through me. He felt the weight of those words settle heavily in his chest. Mars was speaking to him, but in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The entire Martian civilization had once relied on this energy, on this weapon, as a means of defense. But now, the planet's fate was bound to his. He had to understand its legacy, its purpose, before everything spiraled further out of control. Elon stumbled back to the starship, his mind racing. He didn't know how long he had been standing there, lost in the Martian energy, but the feeling of connection was overwhelming. The memories of the Martian general, the echoes of the ancient civilization, pounded in his mind, each vision more vivid than the last. The war machines were awakening. The ancient cities, hidden beneath the surface of Mars, were stirring to life. Gina, I think I understand now. Elon's voice was strained. The Martian civilization was destroyed because they relied too heavily on their technology, the weapon we just shut down. But they weren't just defending Mars, they were protecting something else. Something else? Gina asked, her tone skeptical. What are you talking about? The weapon wasn't built just to fight. Elon paused, struggling to articulate what he had learned. It was meant to contain something. Something buried beneath the surface of Mars, a force that could either save or destroy the planet. It's connected to the Martian legacy, their origin. He paused again, feeling the weight of the realization sink in. Mars isn't just a planet. It's a vault. As Elon sat in the cockpit of the starship, staring at the red horizon outside, a realization struck him: a new mission had taken form, one that went far beyond just stopping the Martian superweapon. The weapon had been a key to something far more ancient and far more powerful. The Martian vault, as he had come to call it, was hidden deep beneath the surface, a repository of knowledge, power, and technology that could either save humanity, or doom it. "What did you say?" Gina's voice interrupted his thoughts. "A vault? Elon, are you telling me there's something buried on Mars that we didn't know about?" "Yes." Elon's voice was filled with awe. "And I think it's time we found it." Just as Elon was formulating his next steps, the ship's comm system crackled with an incoming transmission, a signal from Earth. Elon tensed. "Elon Musk, this is the International Space Coalition." The voice was cold, official. "We've been monitoring your progress on Mars. It's come to our attention that you've discovered something far more dangerous than we anticipated. We need you to come back to Earth immediately." Elon's jaw clenched. "I'm not coming back," he responded sharply. "I've just uncovered something on Mars that could change everything. I'm not leaving until I understand it." "You don't have a choice, Elon. The situation on Earth is escalating. We're already in a state of emergency. You're a threat now." The voice was unwavering. "Return to Earth, or we will be forced to take action." The transmission abruptly ended, leaving Elon in stunned silence. He knew what this meant. The discovery of the Martian vault was no longer a secret, and the International Space Coalition had no intention of letting him continue his search. They would stop him, no matter what. Elon knew the stakes had just been raised. The Martian legacy, the vault, the weapon, it was all too important to let go. But now, he had to deal with forces on Earth that saw him as a threat. Humanity would be torn between those who wanted to exploit Mars for their own gain, and those who wanted to protect its secrets. The race to uncover the truth about the Martian civilization had just begun, but now, Elon would have to face more than just the Martian mysteries. He was going to have to fight for his mission, and for the future of Mars. "Gina, I need your help." Elon's voice was resolute, his mind already focused on the next steps. "What do we need to do?" Gina replied, her tone steady but with the urgency of someone who knew the stakes. "We're going to uncover the truth, no matter who tries to stop us." Elon's gaze was fixed on the horizon. Mars was no longer just a distant planet, it was the key to the future of humanity, and Elon Musk was the only one who could unlock its secrets. Elon's heart raced as the starship descended into the deep Martian landscape. The red surface below looked like an endless sea of dust, but there was something hidden beneath it, a secret that, once uncovered, could change everything. "We're almost there." Gina's voice broke through the tension in Elon's mind. She was sitting beside him, eyes glued to the radar system. "The readings are getting stronger. Whatever is buried beneath us, it's huge." Elon nodded but didn't respond immediately. The transmission from Earth still echoed in his mind. The International Space Coalition had given him an ultimatum: return to Earth or face consequences. But there was no turning back now. Mars held the key to the future, and he would stop at nothing to uncover its secrets. The starship's thrusters fired again, and Elon felt the gentle pull of the ship's descent. Beneath the surface, the Martian vault lay waiting, an ancient, hidden chamber that had been sealed for millennia. If what the Martian general had said was true, it was more than just a vault, it was a repository of knowledge and power that could either elevate humanity or destroy it. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Gina said, breaking his thoughts. "I mean, think about it, this is a moment in history. No one has ever gotten this close to discovering Martian civilization." Elon didn't respond right away. The weight of the decision, the enormity of what lay ahead, was pressing on him. As much as the scientist in him marveled at the discovery, the human side was filled with dread. What if they weren't supposed to find this? What if Mars' legacy was too dangerous for anyone, human or Martian, to control? The ship landed with a soft jolt, and the lights inside the cockpit flickered for a moment. Elon snapped back to the present. "We're here," he said, looking at the underground entrance that had just appeared in front of them. It was massive, an ancient structure, carved into the bedrock of Mars itself. There was no mistaking it, this was the Martian vault. Elon and Gina emerged from the starship into the cold, sterile Martian air. The ground beneath their boots felt solid, but there was an unsettling stillness about the place, as though the very planet was holding its breath. They moved toward the entrance, a large metal door embedded into the rocky surface, covered with Martian symbols, the same ones they had seen back at the research station. "This is it, Elon." Gina's voice was a whisper, reverberating against the silence. "The Martian vault." Elon didn't reply. He was already scanning the entrance for any way to open the door. The symbols seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite make sense of them. He moved closer, his mind racing with the knowledge he'd absorbed. The Martian general's words echoed in his mind. Only the inheritor of Mars can access the vault. He reached out and touched the metal door, and to his surprise, the surface seemed to react to his presence. The symbols on the door shifted, moving like a living language, reacting to his touch. Gina looked over at him, concern written across her face. "What's happening?" "I think it's recognizing me," Elon said, his voice taut with uncertainty. "I don't know how, but it's like the core inside me is syncing with it." The door began to hum, the symbols glowing brighter, and then, with a deep groan, it slowly opened, revealing a dark, vast corridor leading deep into the planet. The air inside was thick, musty, and cold, like the tomb of an ancient civilization that had long since been forgotten. As they walked through the corridor, the walls began to glow faintly, revealing ancient artifacts and discs that Elon couldn't begin to understand. The entire structure was a labyrinth of rooms filled with alien technology, seemingly undisturbed by time. At the center of the vault, the corridor opened into a massive chamber, its ceiling stretching impossibly high. In the center of the room was a large pedestal, upon which rested what appeared to be a Martian artifact, a glowing crystal that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Elon moved toward it, his mind buzzing with questions. What was this? What did it mean? His hand hovered over the crystal, but before he could touch it, a sudden electrical pulse shot out from the artifact, throwing him backward. "Elon!" Gina shouted, rushing to his side. He groaned, slowly sitting up, his head spinning. "What was that?" he muttered, rubbing his temples. The crystal glowed more brightly now, almost alive with energy. He could feel it, the force that the Martians had once relied on was now reaching out to him, responding to the presence of the one who had deactivated the weapon. It's talking to me, Gina," Elon said, his voice shaky. "It's like it's trying to tell me something, but I can't understand it." "What is it saying?" Gina asked, her voice tight with fear. "I don't know, it's not words. It's more like a feeling, like it's pushing its knowledge into my mind. I can't control it. It's too much." Elon staggered to his feet, clutching his head. The information pouring into his brain was overwhelming, knowledge of the Martian people, their rise and fall, their attempts to control the very energy of Mars itself. The weapon, the vault, it had all been part of a larger plan, a desperate attempt to preserve Mars after a catastrophic event that had destroyed their civilization. Suddenly, a warning alert blared on the starship's comm system. Elon's heart skipped a beat as he heard a voice crackling through. "Elon Musk, this is the International Space Coalition. We've traced your location. You have 15 minutes to evacuate, or we will be forced to take action." Elon's stomach churned. Earth was closing in fast. They were going to stop him, no matter what. "We don't have much time," Gina said, grabbing his arm. "We need to make a choice, do we take what we've learned and run, or do we risk everything to uncover the full truth?" Elon looked at the crystal one last time. The Martian legacy was within his grasp. He could feel it, the weight of the past, the promise of the future. But what if uncovering it led to destruction, not salvation? We can't leave yet. Elon said, his voice steady, but filled with determination. We need to understand everything. Elon's pulse pounded in his ears as the countdown to evacuation began. The voice from the International Space Coalition still echoed in his mind. You have 15 minutes to evacuate, or we will be forced to take action. We don't have much time, Elon. Gina's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. She was pacing beside him, looking nervously at the glowing Martian crystal. The chamber around them seemed to hum with energy, as if the vault itself was alive, aware of the looming threat from above. Elon stood frozen, unable to tear his eyes away from the artifact. The crystal seemed to pulse with a strange power, its light growing brighter by the second. The knowledge it held, the ancient secrets of Mars, the history of the once great civilization, was calling to him. But so was Earth. The forces from his home planet were closing in, and the decision was becoming more urgent by the second. The vault was teeming with power, a power so vast and untapped that it could either elevate humanity to unimaginable heights or plunge the world into chaos. Elon. Gina grabbed his arm, pulling him back into reality. What are you going to do? The weight of the choice pressed down on him. Leave Mars, abandon everything they had uncovered, and return to Earth, where unknown consequences awaited, or stay, push forward, and risk everything for the truth. The walls of the vault seemed to close in on him, the pulse of the crystal growing more intense. His head throbbed with the overwhelming knowledge flooding his mind. We can't just leave. Elon finally said, his voice tight with resolve. This is bigger than us, bigger than anything Earth is ready for. We need to understand this, Gina. We need to understand what the Martians tried to protect. Gina's eyes widened with understanding, but also fear. Elon, the ISOC doesn't care about the Martian vault. They want you back. They'll do anything to stop us from uncovering it. Elon nodded grimly. He knew she was right. Earth's forces would stop at nothing to regain control of the situation. The Martian weapon had been deactivated, but the power contained within the vault, the power of Mars itself, was still there. The ISOC wasn't going to let them harness that power, not without their own agenda. We don't have a choice, Gina. Elon said, his voice firmer now. We have to take the risk. We have to unlock the vault and see what's inside. Before Gina could respond, a clanging noise echoed from the corridor behind them, followed by a low hum, like the distant sound of engines. Elon's heart skipped a beat. They're here. Gina whispered, panic flashing across her face. The sound of footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the whir of drones. Earth's forces had arrived, closer than they had expected. Elon turned to the glowing crystal in the center of the room. Time was running out. But he knew the Martian legacy held the answers, and he wasn't going to let the ISOC take it away without a fight. We need to activate the crystal now. Elon said, stepping forward. It's the only way we can survive this. Gina moved to the control panel on the wall, her hands flying over the buttons as she tried to bring the vault systems online. Come on, she muttered under her breath. There has to be something we can do. Elon kept his eyes on the crystal. It was reacting to him, responding to his presence as though it was waiting for him to make the first move. He could feel the energy building, but he wasn't sure what would happen if he made contact. A loud bang echoed through the chamber as the door at the far end burst open. A group of ISOC soldiers appeared in the doorway, weapons raised, their faces obscured by helmets. They didn't hesitate. Elon Musk. Step away from the crystal, one of the soldiers shouted. Elon didn't move. His eyes locked on the crystal, and for a moment, it seemed as if the entire vault held its breath. The soldiers' voices faded away as the energy from the artifact reached a crescendo. It was now or never. Elon took a deep breath and stepped forward, reaching out to touch the crystal. The moment his fingers made contact with the glowing surface, a blinding flash of light erupted from the crystal, enveloping the entire chamber. For a split second, Elon felt like he was floating, as though time had paused around him. He saw visions, the rise of the Martian civilization, its peak, and its eventual fall. He saw Martian cities, their towering spires, bustling with life. Then, the cities crumbled, torn apart by a cataclysmic event, a war, a weapon that had destroyed not only their enemies but also their world. The Martians had built this vault as a last-ditch effort to preserve their knowledge and technology, hoping that one day, someone would come to unlock it. As the visions faded, Elon staggered backward, the weight of what he had seen crashing into him. The Martian history, the weapon, the vault, it all made sense now. It's a fail-safe, Gina. Elon gasped, still reeling from the knowledge. They knew the weapon was too powerful, too dangerous. But the vault, it's not just a weapon. It's a warning. The Martians tried to control the power of the planet, but it was never meant to be controlled. Gina's voice trembled as she looked at him. Elon, we need to leave. They're closing in on us. But Elon couldn't tear his eyes away from the crystal. The Martian legacy had been unlocked, and the consequences were far more devastating than he had ever imagined. Elon turned to face the soldiers who had entered the room, weapons still drawn. He knew that the ISOC would do whatever it took to stop them. But he also knew one thing, the truth could never be hidden again. Mars wasn't just a dead planet, it was a time bomb waiting to explode. Stop! Elon shouted, his voice carrying the weight of everything he had learned. The Martians built this to protect us, not destroy us. This isn't just about Earth. It's about survival. The soldiers didn't move. The tension in the room was palpable. They were waiting for orders, unsure of what to do next. Gina grabbed Elon's arm. We need to go, now. But Elon stood his ground. No. The ISOC wants to control this power. They can't. The world doesn't know what's coming. He turned back to the crystal. We're going to take control of this. If Earth wants to survive, they'll have to accept the truth. A shot rang out. The shot rang out, echoing off the walls of the Martian vault. Elon's mind raced as he felt the bullet pierce the air, but it was too late. The Martian crystal had already started to respond, its energy surging to life. The blast from the gun barely grazed his shoulder, but the shockwave from the crystal threw everyone in the room back. Get down! Gina screamed, pulling Elon to the ground just as the light from the crystal intensified. The vault's walls shuddered and the air seemed to warp as if the very planet itself was reacting to the awakening of the ancient power. Elon's vision blurred, and for a moment, everything seemed to shift into a vivid haze. He could feel the immense power from the crystal flowing through his body, a force so alien, yet strangely familiar, as if it was unlocking something deep within him. What did you do? One of the ISOC soldiers shouted, his voice trembling with fear as he tried to regain his balance. He stared at the crystal, unable to comprehend the energy that was now radiating from it. We have to get out, now. Gina said, pulling Elon toward the entrance. The vault was alive, its ancient machinery groaning, rumbling like a beast awakening from a long slumber. But Elon couldn't move. His feet were frozen to the ground as the crystal's energy coursed through him. It was too much, too overwhelming. The knowledge, the power, it was as if Mars itself was speaking to him, communicating across millennia. Elon! Gina screamed, her voice breaking through the chaos. We need to go, now. It took everything in him to snap out of the trance the crystal had put him in. With a grunt, he ripped himself away from the glowing artifact, but the energy had already begun to spiral out of control. The vault was no longer just a repository of knowledge, it was transforming, its power surging outward. The ground beneath them began to crack. Shocks reverberated through the chamber. Gina yanked Elon's arm again, pulling him toward the exit, but before they could reach the doorway, the vault began to collapse. The walls split open like rotten fruit, revealing hidden chambers deep within the Martian structure. The long-forgotten technologies, machines, conduits, and strange mechanisms, came to life, humming with energy. It wasn't just the crystal anymore, it was as if the entire vault, its core systems, and even the Martian planetary network had awakened all at once. Elon and Gina raced through the narrow corridors, dodging debris as the ceiling crumbled behind them. The vault was falling apart, but the power inside it was only growing stronger. As they reached the outer chamber, Elon felt a heavy wave of dread wash over him. He couldn't explain it, something was coming. And it wasn't just the collapse of the vault, it was something else. Something alive. The sound of distant explosions echoed in the distance, and Elon realized with horror that the ISOC soldiers were already retreating. They had triggered a full-blown evacuation, knowing the vault was no longer safe. But it was too late. The Martian legacy was no longer contained. Elon's head spun with the knowledge pouring into him, but even as the pieces began to fit together, the magnitude of their discovery was becoming terrifyingly clear. The Martians had never intended for anyone to unlock this vault, not even humans. The power within it was too much, too unpredictable. The planetary network they had used to harness the Martian energy was now unstable, and it was spreading rapidly. The Martian crystal was pulsing with energy, its frequencies now broadcasting throughout the entire Martian ecosystem, awakening dormant mechanisms that had been buried for millennia. "What did you unleash?" Gina asked, her voice strained with fear. "This isn't just some treasure trove of knowledge. This is something else." Elon could barely respond. He was still struggling to make sense of the flood of information. But the reality was settling in. What he had activated wasn't just a vault, it was a network that controlled much of the Martian infrastructure. It was what had powered their cities, their defense systems, their very way of life. And now it was waking up. And it was angry. Suddenly, a low, rumbling noise filled the air. The Martian surface began to shake. The ground beneath them was buckling, as if the entire planet was responding to the vault's activation. A gasp escaped Gina's lips as she looked down at the crack in the earth beneath them. "We have to get back to the starship, now," she shouted, her voice filled with desperation. Elon nodded, his mind still clouded with the chaos of the moment. But as he glanced back at the glowing crystal, a sickening realization took hold of him. Mars wasn't just a dead planet anymore. It was coming alive. The Martian legacy was awakening, and it was trying to reassert control over the planet. It wasn't just about history anymore. The Martian network had been a weapon designed to control the very forces of nature on Mars. Mars was no longer a place for exploration. It was a weaponized world, and the legacy of the Martians was threatening everything Elon had worked for. The ground shook violently as the vault began to collapse completely. Elon and Gina ran as fast as they could, but they were far from the entrance. The path to the surface was blocked by falling debris, and it felt as though the entire planet was trying to swallow them whole. "Elon!" Gina screamed as a massive rock fell in their path, forcing them to divert. They had to find another way out, fast. But the chaos was only getting worse. The sky above began to darken, and strange lights flickered across the horizon. It wasn't just the vault that was collapsing, it was Mars itself, reacting to the energy that Elon had released. The Martian legacy was no longer a distant legend, it was real, and it was changing the planet. The ground continued to tremble, shaking with such intensity that it felt like the very bones of Mars were cracking open. Elon's heart raced as he sprinted ahead, the echo of falling debris reverberating through the narrow Martian tunnels. Every step was a battle against gravity, the red dust swirling around them, creating a suffocating cloud of debris. The chaos was like nothing he had ever experienced before. "Elon, we can't keep going like this." Gina shouted, barely audible over the sounds of the planet shaking. Her voice was strained, and he could hear the panic creeping in. "The vault's coming down, the whole planet's shifting. If we don't get to the starship, we're not going to make it." Elon didn't need her to remind him of the stakes. Every instinct in his body told him that Mars was turning against them, fighting back against what they had done. The awakening of the Martian legacy wasn't just some dormant technology, it was alive in ways they couldn't have imagined. He didn't have the luxury of understanding it. The only thing that mattered now was survival. "We have to move, Gina." Elon's voice was tight as he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a nearby passage. The walls of the tunnel seemed to pulse, as if they were closing in, as though the planet itself wanted to trap them inside. Every minute they wasted brought them closer to being buried under the ruins of an ancient, hostile world. They reached the tunnel that led to the starship's launch site, the one place that still offered any hope. But it was far from safe. The starship was about a mile away, and the Martian surface was becoming increasingly unstable. The ground cracked beneath their feet, and strange lights flickered from the depths below. "Hurry!" Gina cried, pushing herself harder, but the tremors were relentless. Every few steps, the ground gave way beneath them, causing both of them to scramble to keep their footing. Elon could see the outline of the starship in the distance, but a large dust storm began to sweep across the Martian plains. The storm wasn't natural, it was the result of the Martian network's activation, the energy from the vault distorting the atmosphere in unpredictable ways. Suddenly, a loud crash from behind made Elon's blood run cold. The tunnel entrance they had just passed had collapsed, and the entire section of the facility was being swallowed by the shifting Martian surface. It was clear now, Mars wasn't just a lifeless planet anymore, it was fighting to keep them there, and it would stop at nothing to keep them from escaping. "Elon, go!" Gina screamed as she grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the starship. But Elon knew there wasn't much time left. Their chances of escape were narrowing by the second. As they raced toward the starship, a new threat emerged. The Martian defense systems, once dormant for eons, began to activate. Automated drones, powered by the Martian network, whizzed by overhead. Their red glowing sensors scanned the terrain, searching for intruders. Elon could hear the hum of their engines, a low, menacing sound. "We need to disable those drones, or we're not getting out of here," Elon shouted, dodging behind a crumbling rock formation for cover. Gina looked around desperately. The drones were circling, scanning for any movement, and it seemed like there was no way around them. "I can't let you do this alone, Elon," she shouted, her eyes wide with determination. Elon grabbed her hand. "We do this together, or not at all. Stay close." Without hesitation, he pulled out a small EMP device from his suit, an emergency tool designed for disabling electronics in a crisis. They didn't have much time before the drones locked in on their position. He aimed the device at the nearest drone, activating it with a click. The drone instantly stopped mid-air, its lights flickering out as it fell to the ground with a loud crash. But the others were quick to respond. They altered their course, zeroing in on their position. "Gina!" Elon yelled, "The device won't last long." Gina nodded and began running toward the starship while Elon covered her from behind. They dodged left and right, narrowly avoiding the incoming laser blasts from the drones. The Martian atmosphere, once silent and still, was now alive with dangerous energy. A strange, electric storm surged across the sky, distorting everything in its path. The ground cracked with jagged fissures as though Mars itself was reacting to the energy Elon had unleashed. Every step they took felt like running through sand, the heavy red dust clouding their vision. But the starship was getting closer, closer than ever before. Elon pushed forward, forcing his body to ignore the pain, the weariness from days of constant danger. But the storm was no longer the only thing to worry about. Out of nowhere, a massive shockwave sent them both to the ground. The force knocked the air out of their lungs, and for a split second, Elon's vision blurred. He looked around and saw the starship swaying, its engines flickering in the chaos. "We have to get to it now," Gina shouted, her voice almost drowned out by the howl of the Martian storm. Elon scrambled to his feet, reaching out to grab her. They didn't have time for anything else. The starship was their only hope, if they didn't reach it in time, Mars would claim them. With one final push, they ran, legs pumping as the storm raged around them. And then, there it was, the starship looming in front of them, its hatch open and waiting for them. As they reached the ship, Elon was the first to climb inside, pulling Gina after him. They slammed the door shut just as the storm reached its peak, and the starship's engines roared to life. "We're going to make it." Gina gasped, her face pale but relieved. Elon didn't answer. His eyes were glued to the viewport. Through the thick dust and storm, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A massive shockwave, larger than anything he'd ever seen, was heading straight for them. It wasn't just the Martian atmosphere, this was something else. "Gina, hold on!" Elon shouted. "This isn't over yet." The Martian storm had awakened far more than just technology, it had activated something deep beneath the surface, something unstoppable. The starship was already in the air, but Elon couldn't shake the feeling that their escape had come too late. The atmosphere outside was a chaotic swirl of dust and electric energy, as if the planet itself was being torn apart by the shockwave they had caused. His fingers flew over the controls, navigating the ship's systems, but no matter how fast he moved, the sense of urgency only deepened. "Elon, what the hell is happening?" Gina shouted, her voice laced with panic as she stared out the viewport. The red landscape below was shifting, the entire surface of Mars seeming to heave and crack, like the planet itself was writhing in pain. The shockwave had been the first sign of what they had unleashed, and now it was clear, this was no simple event. The vault, the crystal, the Martian legacy, it had all been part of something far bigger. "We're not just leaving Mars, we're running from it," Elon muttered, more to himself than to Gina. The reality of their situation was starting to sink in. The shockwave had triggered something deep within the planet, something ancient, and it wasn't over. It had just begun. Behind them, the vast storm clouds continued to churn, lightning flashing across the Martian sky, and Elon could feel the ship system straining to break free of the planet's atmosphere. As they broke through the storm and the ship began to gain altitude, the turbulent winds died down, and a strange silence filled the cockpit. It was almost unnerving, the sudden calm after the storm. Then, a beeping noise pierced the silence. A new alert flashed across the control panel, a signal coming from Mars. At first, Elon thought it was a malfunction, but as he studied the readout, his blood ran cold. It wasn't just a signal, it was a transmission. And it wasn't coming from any known Martian technology. It was a frequency they had never encountered before, one that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the strange energies they had unleashed. "Elon," Gina whispered, her voice trembling as she leaned over his shoulder. "That signal, what is it?" Elon didn't answer right away. His fingers hovered over the controls, unsure of whether he should even engage with the signal. But he knew one thing, Mars wasn't done with them yet. The legacy they had uncovered was still calling out, and now it was reaching beyond the planet, sending a message out into the universe. He activated the comms system, trying to get a clearer read on the transmission. It was weak, distorted, but then, the message became clearer. "To anyone out there. Mars is waking up." The voice was faint, but it was there. Elon's heart pounded in his chest as the transmission continued, each word sinking deeper into his bones. "The vault has been triggered. The legacy has returned. It will not stop until it is whole again." Elon's mind raced as he listened to the voice. It wasn't a Martian voice, it was human, distorted by the frequency, but there was no mistaking it. "Who is this?" Elon muttered under his breath. Gina looked at him, her face pale. "Do you think it's a warning?" Elon didn't answer. He knew it wasn't just a warning, it was a call. The legacy on Mars, the crystal, the technologies, they weren't just isolated relics of a long-dead civilization. They were active, and they were now sending signals beyond the red planet. "We need to get out of here," Elon said, voice strained with urgency. And we need to stop whatever is happening on Mars. As the ship ascended higher, leaving the atmosphere of Mars behind, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The signal was still pulsing in the background, a constant reminder that their troubles were far from over. But then came the next shock. A sudden flashing light appeared on the ship's radar, followed by another alert. "What is that?" Gina asked, her voice sharp with concern. It's not from Mars." Elon's eyes narrowed as he scanned the readings. The signal was no longer coming from the planet below, it was coming from space. Something was out there, just beyond their reach, something they had never encountered before. The energy signature was massive, and it was closing in on them. "We've got company," Elon said grimly. The flashing light on the radar grew larger, and within seconds, the ship was jolted by a violent tremor, sending Elon and Gina crashing against the walls of the cockpit. "What the hell was that?" Gina shouted, barely keeping her balance as she gripped the seat. Elon's hands flew over the controls, trying to stabilize the ship, but there was no mistaking the truth, they were being followed. The Martian storm had spawned something that was now in pursuit of them. The ship lurched again, and Elon realized with horror that they were being pulled in. It wasn't just a simple pursuit, it was a force stronger than any gravitational pull he had ever felt. "Elon, we need to get out of here," Gina shouted, panic rising in her voice. Elon gritted his teeth. The unknown force was getting stronger, and if they didn't act fast, they would be pulled back into the storm's vortex, or worse, into the grasp of whatever was following them. His fingers worked quickly as he engaged the thrusters, pushing the starship to its limits. But it wasn't enough. The strange energy signature from space was too powerful. "Hold on!" Elon shouted as the ship jerked violently again, the lights flickering and the control panels flashing red. He was giving everything he had, but the ship wasn't responding fast enough. The force pulling them was growing stronger with each passing second. And then, as if the planet itself had decided to fight back one final time, the shockwave hit again. This time, it wasn't just from Mars. The energy they had unleashed from the crystal had set off a chain reaction that was sending shockwaves not just across Mars, but into the deep expanse of space. The true power of the Martian legacy was not confined to the planet. It had the potential to reach far beyond. Elon knew that Mars wasn't just a planet, it was a beacon. And it was calling something much bigger to Earth. Something dangerous. The starship shuddered violently as the ship was pulled deeper into the strange force's orbit. Elon's knuckles turned white as he gripped the control panel, his fingers flying over buttons in a desperate attempt to regain control. Gina was holding onto the seat, her face pale with fear as the strange energy signature continued to grow stronger on the radar. "Elon, we're being pulled in." Gina's voice trembled with panic. He didn't need to be told. He could feel it too, the pull was relentless. The engines roared, fighting the unseen force that seemed to have a mind of its own, but the starship was struggling. The ship wasn't designed to handle this kind of energy. It was pushing the limits of everything they had built. "Elon, this is bad. Really bad," Gina continued, her eyes scanning the rapidly approaching unknown force on the radar. "What is it? What's happening?" Elon clenched his jaw. He couldn't fully comprehend what was going on. The energy wasn't just gravitational, it felt like something alive, something sentient that was reacting to their presence. He had been warned about Martian anomalies, but nothing had prepared him for this. This was beyond human understanding, this was the legacy of the Martian civilization, and they had triggered something ancient and powerful. With each second, the ship grew heavier in the air. They were being drawn into something far beyond Mars, something more dangerous than anything Elon had encountered before. He had no idea if they were heading toward another planet, a space anomaly, or something that had been hidden from the universe for millennia. As the ship continued to hurtle toward the strange energy field, a flash of light erupted from the distance. Elon squinted at the viewport. The light grew brighter, more intense, blinding. And then, out of the blinding flash, something emerged, a massive, cylindrical shape, floating in space. It was a ship, but not like anything Elon had ever seen. Its surface shimmered, reflecting light in strange, hypnotic patterns, as though the ship itself was alive. The surface pulsed with an eerie glow, changing colors with every beat of the energy within it. Elon's breath caught in his throat. It was enormous, easily 5 times the size of the starship, and it was heading straight for them. "What the hell is that?" Gina whispered, her voice barely audible. Before Elon could respond, the ship's surface seemed to shift, and the next thing they knew, the entire starship was surrounded by a wave of electromagnetic force. The ship bucked violently, the systems flashing warning lights. The engine stalled, and the hum of the starship's systems was replaced by an unnatural silence. They were trapped. "Elon, it's pulling us in," Gina cried, her voice cracking. The massive ship was no longer just an object on the radar, it was now directly in front of them, so close that they could make out strange, unfathomable symbols etched along its sides. It was as though the ship had been designed by a civilization that existed far beyond human knowledge, a cosmic intelligence whose reach was limitless. Suddenly, the eerie silence was shattered by a voice, one that sounded like it was coming from all directions at once, resonating deep inside their minds. "Welcome, travelers. You have awakened what was meant to stay dormant." The voice was not human, it was otherworldly, and yet, it seemed to understand them perfectly. The voice vibrated with a strange kind of power. "What have you done?" the voice continued, a deep, almost sorrowful tone lacing its words. "You have disturbed the balance. Mars was never meant to speak again. Now, it calls, and you have answered." Gina and Elon exchanged a glance, both of them shaken to their core. This was not what they had expected. They had thought the Martian vault was just an ancient repository of knowledge, but now they understood the truth: Mars wasn't just a dead planet. It had been a watcher, a silent sentinel in the universe, guarding against something far worse. Who are you?" Elon demanded, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. The voice paused, and then replied in a tone that seemed almost amused. "I am not what you would call a who. I am a remnant of the legacy, the consciousness of Mars, the protector of its secrets. And now, I am awakened." Elon's mind raced. The legacy wasn't just technology, it was alive. The vault was just a part of a larger network, a kind of intergalactic consciousness that spanned the galaxy. And it wasn't just concerned with Mars, it was worried about something much more dangerous. The strange ship moved closer, its pulse becoming more intense, and the force around them grew stronger. Elon realized they weren't just stuck in a gravity well, they were in the grip of something far more sophisticated. You were never meant to reach this far. You were never meant to disturb the power of the vault. It will take what it needs to survive, and now, it needs you. The voice echoed in their minds, sending waves of cold dread through Elon's body. The Martian legacy is only the beginning. It is connected to a force far greater than your understanding. And soon, it will consume everything. The words hit like a sledgehammer, and Elon felt the weight of them settle deep into his chest. This was bigger than Mars. This was something cosmic, something that had existed long before humanity had ever set foot on the red planet. It had been waiting for the right time to awaken, and now, that time had come. What do you want with us?" Gina's voice trembled as she finally found her voice, her eyes wide with terror. "You will serve as the catalyst for the next phase. You will help bring about the merging of Mars and the legacy. But first, you must understand that you cannot escape. You are part of the design." Elon's mind spun as the implications of the voice's words sank in. The Martian legacy was not just a force, it was a consciousness, an entity that could control minds, manipulate energy, and bend space itself. And now, it was using them to fulfill its own mysterious and dangerous purpose. But Elon wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He had always believed that humanity's will was stronger than anything the universe could throw at them. He wasn't going to let Mars, or whatever this was, take them without a fight. He slammed his hand down on the controls, trying to disengage the electromagnetic grip that was holding the starship in place. His heart pounded, his mind racing through possible solutions, but every attempt he made was blocked by the overwhelming force of the legacy. The grip of the mysterious force around them tightened, a relentless pull that seemed to come from all directions at once. The starship shuddered under the strain, its systems flickering and buzzing in alarm. Elon's heart raced as he fought to maintain control, but with each second, it felt like they were losing ground. "Elon, we're not going to make it." Gina's voice was tinged with panic, her hands gripping the console as the ship jerked violently. He could feel the energy field that surrounded them now, like a giant, invisible hand pulling them in, crushing them with its weight. The ship was no longer just an object caught in the pull of an unknown force, it was trapped, helpless against the power that surged around them. "We can't give up now, Gina." Elon's voice was steady, but his mind was racing. The Martian legacy had awakened, and it wasn't just a relic of the past. It was an entity, alive and powerful, with plans far beyond anything they could understand. The strange cylindrical ship was still looming before them, its pulsating energy surrounding them. Elon felt it, deep in his bones. The cosmic intelligence that controlled the legacy wasn't just interested in Mars anymore. It was interested in them. "I know it's hard to believe, but we can't let it control us," Elon said, determination flickering in his eyes. He wasn't going to let the legacy take them down without a fight. But just as he made the decision to fight back, the voice spoke again. "You do not understand." The voice was calm, almost patronizing. "You are part of the design, part of the awakening. You cannot resist what is already within you. You were chosen." Elon clenched his fists. This was not a force they could easily defeat. The legacy had been lying dormant for millennia, and now it had chosen them as its instruments. But why? Why them? He turned to Gina, whose face was still pale but resolute. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. "We can't fight this thing. It's everywhere." But Elon wasn't so sure. No one had ever believed in the power of the human will to overcome impossible odds. And this was the ultimate test. The voice interrupted his thoughts, its tone now colder, more commanding. "You are only beginning to comprehend the power of the legacy. Soon, you will see. The merging of worlds has begun." The ship jerked again, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The atmosphere inside the starship felt thicker, heavier, as though the very air around them had turned into a force field. Elon's chest tightened with an intense pressure, and for a split second, he wondered if the ship might collapse under the weight of whatever was pressing down on them. But then, there was a shift, a sudden, overwhelming surge of energy that radiated from the core of the Martian ship, and the next thing they knew, they were no longer alone. "What is happening?" Gina gasped. In the cockpit with them, a figure appeared, a humanoid shape, glowing faintly with the same eerie light that surrounded the Martian ship. It wasn't a person, not exactly. It was more like a hologram, or perhaps a projection. But the intensity of its presence was undeniable. "I am the legacy, the keeper of the Martian consciousness, the overseer of the awakening." The figure spoke, its voice deep and resonating. The air seemed to shudder with each word it spoke. Elon felt his pulse quicken. This was what they had awakened. This was the true power behind everything they had uncovered on Mars. "You are chosen for a reason, Elon Musk, Gina Walker. You are not just witnesses to the legacy's power. You are the catalyst." Gina's eyes widened. "Catalyst for what?" The figure turned its gaze toward her, and though it had no physical eyes, Elon could feel the weight of its attention. "You will soon see, human. The merging is already in progress. The boundaries between worlds are beginning to dissolve. The legacy will awaken across the galaxy, bringing the knowledge of Mars to all who are ready. Elon's heart skipped a beat. Was the legacy talking about conquering other worlds? Spreading its influence across the stars? You cannot stop what is already set in motion. But you can be part of the transition. The choice is yours. The pressure in the cockpit was growing unbearable now, the air crackling with raw energy. Elon knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The legacy was pushing them to make a choice, to join its cause, to accept the merging of worlds, or to resist and risk everything. But what would resisting even mean? How could they resist a force so ancient, so powerful, that it seemed to transcend the very fabric of time and space? What if we don't want to be part of this? Elon asked, his voice low but steady. The figure seemed to pause for a moment, almost as if considering his question. Then you will not be part of the future. The choice is yours, Elon Musk. Do you wish to embrace the future of the legacy? Elon swallowed hard, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had always believed that humanity's future lay in the hands of individuals, that the strength of the human spirit could overcome even the greatest obstacles. But now, facing this entity, he wasn't so sure. Gina turned to him, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying her fear. Elon, we can't let them control us. This isn't our future. Elon looked at her, and then at the figure in front of them. The legacy's presence was overwhelming, its power all-encompassing. But was it the future they wanted? We're not going to be part of your plan. Elon said firmly, looking directly at the glowing figure. We choose to fight for our future. The figure's response was a long, deep laugh, one that echoed in the starship's cockpit and sent a chill down Elon's spine. Very well. The figure said, its voice thick with a sense of finality. You have chosen. The awakening will proceed. But you will not be part of it. And you will soon see that the consequences of your choice are far greater than you can imagine. The light around them intensified, and the pressure in the cockpit suddenly released as the figure vanished. The starship was once again free to move, but the path ahead was uncertain. As the figure disappeared, Elon slammed his hand onto the control panel, pushing the ship's engines to their maximum. The starship shot forward, tearing away from the energy field that had been holding them captive. They were free, but they were far from safe. Behind them, the Martian ship began to pulse again, sending out a shockwave that rattled their ship and pushed them further away. But even as they gained distance, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. The legacy wasn't done with them. It had merely begun. The starship shuddered as it raced through the vast emptiness of space. Elon gripped the controls tighter, his knuckles white. The strange force that had held them captive moments ago was still out there, lurking just beyond the edge of the Martian atmosphere. The legacy, the ancient, cosmic intelligence, wasn't finished with them yet. They had made their choice to resist, but it was clear now, the consequences of that choice were far greater than they could have imagined. Elon, we need to get to Earth, fast. Gina's voice was filled with urgency, her eyes glued to the monitors. The readings on their radar showed that the strange ship was pursuing them, growing closer with each passing second. We can't outrun it forever. Elon didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing. The legacy had made it clear, they were part of something much bigger than themselves. And now, their defiance had set off a chain reaction, one that could change everything. He turned to Gina, determination burning in his eyes. We're not going to Earth. What? Gina stared at him, confused. You said we needed to get back home. Not anymore. Elon's voice was steady, but his heart was pounding in his chest. We're going to take the fight to them. We're going to end this here. Gina blinked in disbelief. Elon, you can't be serious. We're not even sure what we're dealing with. That thing is. I know what it is. Elon cut her off, his voice firm. He knew what he had to do. The legacy had wanted to use them as its instruments, to merge Mars with an ancient force that could consume entire worlds. But it hadn't accounted for their will to fight. But we can't run from it. It's not just a ship, it's part of a greater force. And if we let it continue, everything we know will change. Gina's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. The truth was, Elon was right. They couldn't run from this. The legacy wasn't just an alien intelligence, it was a cosmic force. And if they didn't stop it here, it might spread across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Okay. So what's the plan? Gina asked, her voice steady now, no trace of hesitation. Elon took a deep breath. He had one final move left, and it was a gamble. But it was the only option. We're going to Mars. We need to destroy the heart of the legacy. And we need to do it before it merges fully with the rest of the galaxy. His mind was clear now. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about saving everyone. The starship hurtled back toward the Martian surface, the engines at full power as the strange ship continued to pursue them. The glowing, pulsing vessel seemed to respond to their movements, its presence growing stronger, more oppressive. It's following us. Gina murmured, staring at the energy readings. Elon, we don't have much time. The Martian surface loomed closer, a barren landscape of reds and browns. In the distance, the Martian vault, where they had uncovered the secrets of the legacy, was now in sight. The place where it all began. The very heart of the Martian consciousness. There. Elon shouted, pointing toward the vault. That's where we need to go. The core of the legacy is buried beneath it. If we destroy that, we can end the merging. Gina nodded, her jaw clenched. She didn't need to ask how they were going to destroy something so powerful. She already knew. Elon had one last trick up his sleeve, an experimental fusion device, one that could theoretically disrupt the cosmic energy at the heart of the legacy. But whether it would work, or whether they would survive long enough to use it, was still uncertain. As they approached the Martian vault, the strange ship grew closer, almost as if it had a mind of its own. The legacy wasn't going to let them destroy it without a fight. The energy reading spiked, and Elon could feel the air inside the starship crackling with tension. We're too close. Gina warned, her voice tight with fear. It's going to overpower us. But Elon wasn't listening. He had already set the coordinates for the fusion device, and he was ready to push the button that would activate it. He only hoped that the legacy hadn't anticipated this move. If they didn't act quickly, they would be trapped in its influence forever. Hold on tight. Elon muttered under his breath, his fingers hovering over the controls. This was it. The final battle. The legacy had underestimated the human spirit, and now they were going to show it just how wrong it was. With a quick motion, he slammed his hand down on the activation switch. The fusion device hummed to life, sending out a shockwave of energy that rippled through the ship. The surrounding air seemed to vibrate as the force built up, intensifying with each passing second. At that moment, the strange ship surrounding them exploded with a burst of light, an overwhelming, blinding flash that filled the cockpit. Elon's breath caught in his throat as he watched the energy fields ripple and crack. The pulse of the legacy began to waver, like it was losing its hold on the fabric of space itself. It's working. Gina exclaimed, her voice full of disbelief. But just as they thought they had won, a voice, the same voice from before, echoed through their minds. You may have disrupted the merging, but the legacy will never truly die. The voice was cold, almost disappointed. It is written in the stars. The future is inevitable. The air around them began to tremble, and the legacy tried to fight back, but the fusion device held strong. Slowly, but surely, the pulsating energy of the Martian consciousness began to fade. The cosmic force that had been pulling them in, the legacy that had controlled their every move, was finally losing its grip. The starship's systems returned to normal as the legacy's influence weakened. Elon and Gina sat in stunned silence, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. The legacy had been defeated, but at what cost? As the Martian vault and the strange energy ship slowly disappeared behind them, Elon let out a slow breath. They had won, but they had also uncovered something far greater than they had ever expected. Mars was not just a planet, it was a gateway, a conduit for a force far beyond human comprehension. "We did it," Gina said softly, still processing what they had just experienced. Elon nodded, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. "Yeah. But this is just the beginning." The universe had changed. And now, humanity's journey had truly begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?